Chapter 400. Samsara Pupils. Luo Qianyang's Sea of Consciousness and Luo Qianyang's Body. The three-dimensional talismans, which had almost taken shape, but still had no fixed shape, suddenly fixed into the shape of a ball. These spherical, three-dimensional talismans were not really round, but slightly oval, looking more like the planets that Luo Fan had seen in his previous life. Within this planet-like three-dimensional talisman seal, the complicated and profound lines were intertwined like a tangled mess, but contained some kind of natural law of heaven and earth within it. What was more amazing was that inside this planet-shaped three-dimensional talisman, there were layers of indistinguishable, but they really existed, layers of intersections. These intersections divided this planet-shaped three-dimensional talisman into 9 parts. The lines inside each part were independent, but they had an extremely mysterious and incomparably close connection with the other 8 parts. Furthermore, every part of it was constantly shifting, circulating, and changing its position, forming an extremely mysterious cycle. This was Luo Qianyang's Dharma Power Unit. At the moment when the last heaven's tribulation finally dissipated, Luo Qianyang finally broke through the bottleneck that blocked his progress. His Dharma power was perfected, and he achieved the supreme, earthly, immortal realm. At this moment, in Luo Qianyang's meridians, what was full of were the planet-shaped three-dimensional talismans divided into 9 parts. There were a large number of these three-dimensional talismans, reaching a total of 129,600, which was much more than when Luo Fu, Guangpu, and even Hong Jun first achieved the earthly immortal realm. It reached the level of the number of Dharma Power Unit in Luo Fan's body when he first achieved the earthly immortal realm. From this point of view, Luo Qianyang could be said to have obtained the true inheritance of Luo Fan. His foundation was at least several times deeper and more stable than that of Luo Fu and Guangpu. These Dharma Power Units began to circulate quickly in Luo Qianyang's body according to the route of the 9-heaven transforming technique. At the same time, the mnemonic incantation of the 9-heaven transforming technique was also flowing quickly in Luo Qianyang's mind. With the cooperation of these two, the magical power unit circulated 81 times in Luo Qianyang's body in the blink of an eye. In the end, it suddenly gathered in his dantian, and a loud bang came from his dantian. This enormous bang was like the first clap of thunder after the world was split open. It contained boundless vitality, and it drew the boundless vitality of the world to give rise to a profound change. Hong Jun, Luo Fu, Guangpu, and the others who were watching Luo Qianyang's tribulation from thousands of miles away were shocked, and joy appeared in their eyes at the same time. They instantly understood what kind of state Luo Qianyang was in at this moment. At this moment, the condensed magic power units within Luo Qianyang's dantian had completely lost their form. All that was left was a ball that was constantly expanding and contracting like a strange fruit. That was the Tao fruit. It was the earth immortal Tao fruit that Luo Qianyang had finally obtained after working tirelessly for tens of millions of years. This earth immortal Tao fruit was very mysterious. It was condensed from Dharma power and could be dispersed or gathered. It had an extremely mysterious connection with the divine soul in the sea of consciousness. Even the frequency of the contraction and contraction of the two was very compatible. It contained the origin of Luo Qianyang's life. From now on, as long as this earth immortal Tao fruit was not destroyed, Luo Qianyang would never die. Even if the environment of the outside world changed greatly, the connate vitality that allowed all living beings in the untainted world to live forever would disappear completely. Luo Qianyang's lifespan would not come to an end because of this. It could be said that from now on, unless Luo Qianyang encountered an attack from a life stronger than him or a powerful force that destroyed his earth immortal Tao fruit, it would never die and be immortal. This kind of immortality was true immortality. At this point, Luo Qianyang, like his parents and Luo Fan, could sit and watch the wind and clouds rise and fall. He had unlimited time to comprehend the mystery of the Great Way. After the earth immortal Tao fruit was formed, Luo Chunyang's body shook. He opened his eyes, and a smile gradually appeared on his face. He was not like Luo Fu, Guang Pu, Hong Jun, and the others in the past, who immediately opened his mouth to express his joy in some mysterious words after obtaining the earth immortal Tao fruit. Instead, he only smiled faintly, stood up, and patted his clothes as if he was patting away the dust. As he moved, the sun and moon that were revolving around his body suddenly shrank. In the blink of an eye, they became the size of 2 eyeballs. They rushed into his eyes, causing golden or silver halos to appear faintly in his pupils. It looked slightly similar to Luo Fan's great sun golden eyes and bright moon silver eyes. That was the truth. Although the yin-yang sun-moon great reincarnation was created by Luo Chunyang himself, it was also a mixture of various eye techniques that Luo Fan had taught him. After being integrated into his eyes, although it could not see through the origin of everything like the golden eyes of the great sun and the silver eyes of the bright moon, there were still some magical abilities that allowed him to see through the flow of yuan qi, see through the barriers of formations, and obtain all kinds of mysterious power. At this moment, Hong Jun and the others finally knew that the heaven tribulation was finally over. With a slight thought, the magic cloud swayed, and in a breath, it crossed the distance of thousands of miles and came to the mountain where Luo Chunyang was. After the magic cloud dispersed, everyone landed on the mountain. Fortunately, I did not disappoint you and finally obtained the earth immortal Tao fruit. I can finally stay with my father and mother. Luo Chunyang said to Luo Fu and Guang Pu, Good child. Your mother and I have been waiting for this day for millions of years. Luo Fu was extremely excited at this moment, and his words were somewhat incoherent. Guang Pu was also quite surprised at this moment. Her face was full of smiles, and her eyes were filled with indescribable gratification and joy as she looked at Luo Chunyang. Thank you for your guidance, Uncle Master. Without your guidance, I'm afraid I don't know how many more years it would take for me to obtain the Tao fruit. Luo Chunyang turned and bowed to Hong Jun. There's no need to be so polite. You can understand the key point, and that's your own opportunity. As your Uncle Master, I won't take such credit. Hong Jun said calmly. Although his expression was not much different from usual, everyone who was familiar with Hong Jun could clearly feel that Hong Jun was in a good mood at this moment. All right, Chunyang has just obtained the earth immortal Tao fruit, and he still needs to consolidate it. However, the two of you have only broken through halfway. Go and continue your breakthrough. Hong Jun waved his hand when he saw that everyone still wanted to speak. As the eldest senior brother, he was the first person under Luo Fan. When Luo Fan was not around, he was the biggest leader. Even Luo Fu, who was the son of Luo Fan, had to listen to his orders. Therefore, Luo Fu and Guang Pu hurriedly bowed in response. When Luo Chunyang heard Hong Jun's words, he realized that his parents were in a strange state. He could not help but feel ashamed and touched. He hurriedly said, Father, Mother, I'm really unfilial to affect your cultivation because of my matter. Silly child, what's there to be filial about? If we don't watch from the side, how can we cultivate in peace? Luo Fu smiled and said, There's no need to say more. Quickly consolidate your cultivation realm. Your mother and I still need to continue to break through. We'll talk about it later. Luo Chunyang naturally knew that it was not the time to talk. He hurriedly bowed in response and respectfully watched Luo Fu and Guang Pu leave. Luo Fu and Guang Pu immediately turned into 2 long rainbows and disappeared in front of Luo Chunyang and Hong Jun. After seeing the couple leave, Luo Chunyang said to Hong Jun, Chunyang will take his leave. Go ahead. Your fruit of the way is more mysterious and sturdy than ours. Only Master can provide you with the best guidance. If you want to, you can go to Mount Buzhou and ask for Master's guidance after consolidating your cultivation. Hong Jun originally wanted to nod and let Luo Chunyang go, but after thinking about it, he still said this. Luo Chunyang's eyes lit up when he heard that. He hurriedly nodded and thanked. Thank you for your guidance, Martial Uncle. I understand. After saying that, he bowed and turned into a long rainbow. However, he did not return to his cave residence. Instead, he directly descended into the mountain below. He opened up a small stone room in the depths of the mountain and sat down cross-legged. Seeing Luo Chunyang's actions, Hong Jun did not feel disobedient. He turned around and stared at the abstract starry sky in front of him that had recovered. Endless information flowed through his mind. He tried hard to evolve the incomplete natural array formed by the nearly 120,000 continents. He wanted to find the most fundamental law so that he could use the easiest method to integrate the living beings on the nearly 120,000 continents and complete his master's task. Luo Chunyang, who was in the depths of the mountain, closed his eyes at this moment. His aura was restrained, and the earthly immortal Tao fruit condensed from mana units was expanding and contracting in his dantian. It was explaining some kind of truth of heaven and earth and the mystery of the universe. At this moment, Luo Chunyang's mind was focused on the world in his sea of consciousness. That's right, it was the world in the sea of consciousness. Luo Chunyang's sea of consciousness, which was originally only 1,000 miles in circumference, had become a complete world at this moment. This world was a world of light. Although the entire world was only 10 times wider than the previous sea of consciousness, only having a radius of 10,000 miles, and the height was only 10 times higher, being only 1,000 miles high, its nature was already completely different from before. The previous sea of consciousness could only be regarded as a sea of consciousness. At most, it could be regarded as an ocean or a void. At this moment, the sea of consciousness was already a very complete world. It exuded all kinds of aura that only a complete world could exude. The entire sea of consciousness gave people a feeling that the sky was high and the earth was wide. The entire world of the sea of consciousness was filled with extremely rich, pure yang qi. This kind of pure yang qi was different from the primordial qi of the outside world, the mana in his body, the free energy in the void, the infinite star essence qi in the endless starry sky, the true fire of the sun, the essence of the tiny moon. This kind of qi seemed to exist and not exist at the same time. It could be said that it didn't exist, but it was a fact that it existed there. It was a fact that it existed, but it had no substance or form. This mysterious pure yang qi had the same appearance as the innate qi that only the innate gods could emit. Both of them were mysterious, unpredictable, and indescribably wonderful forms. This infinite pure yang qi filled the world of the sea of consciousness, filling the whole world, covering everything in the sky and on the ground under this pure yang qi. In the center of the sea of consciousness, where the pure yang qi was the densest, Luo Chunyang's spirit was in it. At this moment, Luo Chunyang's spirit was tens of thousands of feet high. Sitting cross-legged in the void, his whole body was shining with golden light, and his body was extremely stable. He also exuded a strong, yet mellow and hard-to-grind aura. This was the spirit cultivated by the 9-heaven-sun transformation technique, and it contained the Tao that Luo Chunyang had cultivated for tens of millions of years, and it had infinite power. At this moment, the eyes of Luo Chunyang's spirit suddenly opened. Rings of gold and silver light flickered in his eyes. I'm still not as good as Grandpa. When Grandpa attained the earthly immortal Tao fruit, the sea of consciousness was 49,000 miles wide, and its height reached 4,900 miles. Now, I have such a deep accumulation and a solid foundation, but I'm only 1/5 of Grandpa's. Luo Chunyang carefully observed his sea of consciousness and couldn't help feeling discouraged. After all, his Taoist heart was tough and hard to break. This discouragement only lasted for a short while before he completely recovered. It was not embarrassing for him to be inferior to Grandpa. In Luo Chunyang's heart, Luo Fan was an omnipotent existence. It was normal for Luo Chunyang to be inferior to him. If Luo Chunyang was stronger than Luo Fan, he would not dare to believe it, and even wonder if he had fallen into the trap of the heavenly devil and mistook the illusion for reality. After sighing with emotion, Luo Chunyang's thoughts moved slightly. The infinite pure yang qi in the entire sea of consciousness shook slightly, and suddenly countless vortexes appeared. All the pure yang qi gathered towards the countless vortexes according to some strange law. Soon, the entire sea of consciousness was left with these countless vortexes. Apart from these vortexes, there was nothing else in the sea of consciousness. Luo Chunyang's thoughts kept changing. These vortexes also kept moving and changing. Finally, all the vortexes separated into two sides, one above and one below, and disappeared in the two directions of the sea of consciousness, covering the entire area of the sea of consciousness. When the vortexes were completely fixed, a violent change suddenly occurred. The countless vortexes suddenly disappeared without a trace. What replaced them was a world completely formed by pure yang qi. In the sky, there were golden clouds, twinkling stars, and the sun and moon rotated on the ground. There were mountains and rivers, flowers and trees, swamps, deserts, oceans, plains. All of these were vivid and lifelike, but they were all formed by the pure yang qi. They seemed illusory, real, and fake. It was extremely mysterious. This is more like it. Seeing this change, Luo Chunyang felt that the sea of consciousness had become more stable because of this change, and he could not help but reveal a faint smile on his face. Of course, this world was not perfect, and could even be said to be quite simple. There were countless structures that were not suitable and needed to be slowly adjusted in the future. But after all, it was already the prototype of a complete world. It could be said that the foundation had been established, and it only needed to spend some time in the future to adjust it in combination with the natural landscape of the outside world. One day, this world would definitely be comparable to Luo Fan's Sea of Consciousness, and the degree of stability would definitely be able to shorten the distance between it and Luo Fan's Sea of Consciousness. Understanding this, the smile on Luo Chunyang's face became even wider. As he turned his head and looked around, his thoughts moved slightly, and his mind returned to his body from a mysterious position in the sea of consciousness. This body had been tempered by the heavenly tribulation, and after experiencing the impact of the earthly immortal's Tao fruit forming, it was more than 10 times stronger than before. Every part of this body, every muscle fiber, every bit of bone marrow, and every kind of internal organs were extremely tough and full of vitality. They contained a shockingly powerful force and possessed indescribable vitality. The most important meridians had been expanded to the extreme, and they were as wide as a surging river. They were as solid as the hardest rock in the world. Even his magic power was like a drop in the ocean in these meridians, and they were even smaller than a strand of hair. Looking at this body, Luo Chunyang instantly understood. The foundation of my body's cultivation has already been solidified, and I no longer need to temper my body in the future. The focus of my cultivation has already shifted to the earthly immortal's Tao fruit. As long as the Tao fruit can improve, this body will naturally be able to keep up. Even my current body seems to be able to allow me to cultivate to the golden immortal realm with the perfect earthly immortal's Tao fruit. No wonder grandfather only told me to temper my body before achieving the Tao fruit, but never told me how to strengthen my body after achieving the Tao fruit. Luo Chunyang instantly understood. With a thought, the earthly immortal's Tao fruit in his body suddenly collapsed and turned into magic power that began to circulate in his meridians. As the magic power began to circulate, the endless earth origin chi in the surroundings madly gathered towards him and entered his meridians. It was twisted by his magic power units and refined into the purest energy. Then, it surged into the magic power units and was devoured by the magic power to fill the emptiness of the magic power units. This was also the reason why Luo Chunyang had chosen this mountain to consolidate his cultivation. When he had just achieved the Tao fruit, the magic power was only an empty shell, an extremely empty existence. If he wanted to truly consolidate his cultivation, he needed to work hard to absorb endless power and fill the magic power units. He didn't need to make the magic power units perfect, but at least he had to make the magic power units no longer empty, no longer an empty shell. Because of the heavenly tribulation, and because Luo Fan had once stood on this mountain, the Earth origin chi here was more than 1,000 times richer than other mountains. Absorbing the Earth origin chi here to fill the magic power units was more suitable than in his cave abode. Chapter 4:01. Pangu's ear bone in the southwest, 300 million kilometers away from Mount Buzhou, Guling and old ancestor Sky Dragon were at this moment, and there was a huge explosion of energy. At the same time, the third life-saving mystic art that he had left on Guling was also activated. There's actually such a place so close to Buzhou Mountain. This thought flashed across Luo Fan's mind. With a thought, he flashed and took a step forward, causing the space to twist and tremble slightly. In the blink of an eye, his figure had already appeared hundreds of thousands of kilometers away, and with a few more strides, the distance he traversed with every single step increased by countless times. In next to no time, he traversed a distance of almost 150 million kilometers and arrived at that location. At this moment, a mountain range with a radius of 100,000 kilometers suddenly rushed out of the ground. It was so fast and powerful that it had reached an earth-shattering level. Guling and Sky Dragon Ancestor were in a small valley at the center of the mountain range. The valley was only a few kilometers in radius, with a small pool in the center. Gulin and old ancestor Sky Dragon were currently in the pool. From an unknown depth at the bottom of the pool, 1296 tentacles, which were completely condensed from the purest essence of water, rushed out of the pool and formed a faintly discernible, yet mysterious, formation which contained the mysteries of the universe, trapping Guling and ancestor Sky Dragon in it. The tentacles formed from water essence flickered with countless flashes of spiritual light, constantly sweeping toward Guling and ancestor Tianlong. However, the man and the dragon did not just sit around and wait for their deaths. Countless divine abilities and dermic arts were unleashed from their bodies, and as light flashed, they kept moving towards the light that was sweeping towards them. When these spells collided with the light, there was no earth-shattering movement. With just a faint flash and tremble, the spells cast by Guling and old ancestor Sky Dragon were annihilated by the light that swept toward them. If Guling didn't have a thin layer of defense made of countless mysterious three-dimensional talismans to block the light rays, Guling and old ancestor Sky Dragon would have been annihilated by the light rays like the magic arts they had cast. It was the last of the three life-saving divine abilities that Luo Fan had bestowed upon Guling to protect Guling and old ancestor Sky Dragon. This life-saving mystic art was extremely powerful. Not only did it have defensive capabilities, but could also burst forth with world-destroying might, directly resolving all dangers. No matter how dangerous a mystic art was, it could still be destroyed. But at this moment, the divine ability had already been activated, but it was unable to unleash its destructive power. It was unable to destroy the surrounding water elemental essence tentacles, allowing Guling and old ancestor Tianlong to escape from this dangerous situation. Luo Fan floated in the void and looked down at the scene below. His eyes flickered with golden and silver light, and there were countless light and shadow lines flowing through his pupils. In the blink of an eye, he had completely grasped all the changes happening below. There's actually such a rock creature, and it's hidden so deeply. If it wasn't for some unknown reason this time, I'm afraid I wouldn't have been able to discover the existence of such a creature. Luo Fan couldn't help but be greatly surprised after understanding the truth below. The mountain range below seemed like an ordinary mountain range, but it was actually a mysterious life form. This life form was also an innate god. However, it was not the kind of innate god that Luo Fan had seen in the past, which was born from the source of primal chaos chi. Instead, it was born from something that was even more mysterious, even rarer, and at the same time, even more obscure and difficult to find. That thing was a piece of ear bone that fell off Panga's body after he split the world apart. Pangu's bone, even though it's only an ear bone, contains endless mysteries. If I can comprehend it, the power of Pangu's bone, which is transformed from my soul, might be improved by a lot. Luo Fan thought as he raised his hand and waved. As he waved, the void of the untainted world naturally changed mysteriously. As the void twisted, a mysterious force acted on the formation that trapped Guling and Sky Dragon Ancestor. This force was extremely natural and mysterious. It was like water flowing downwards, the sun rising and setting, the wind rising and the clouds surging. Under the effect of this force, the formation suddenly shook, and the light released by Guling and Sky Dragon Ancestor suddenly disappeared. As the light disappeared, Guling's life-saving divine ability shook slightly and broke through the obstruction of the formation with Guling and Sky Dragon Ancestor. In the blink of an eye, they had already rushed thousands of miles away and arrived in front of Luo Fan. At this time, before Guling and Sky Dragon Ancestor could react, they both launched a divine ability to stop the light from sweeping towards them. These two divine abilities were in the form of light. Guling's divine ability contained a strong fighting spirit and had the power to destroy everything. Sky Dragon Ancestor's divine ability was a variant of the Dragon Emperor's power. It was pure and condensed, and its power was quite amazing. If these two divine abilities landed on a mountain that was millions of zhong high, that mountain would probably be directly turned into powder in the blink of an eye. Even the powder might not be left, and the traces of its existence in the world would be directly erased. However, these divine abilities were like ants bearing their fangs and claws to Luo Fan. They didn't pose any threat at all. With a thought, the two divine abilities instantly shook and disappeared. They couldn't even get within one zhong of Luo Fan. Feeling the slight backlash of the divine abilities disappearing, Guling and Sky Dragon Ancestor finally came back to their senses. They finally saw Luo Fan, who they hadn't seen for over 1,300 years. They couldn't help but panic in excitement. They knelt in the air and kept begging for forgiveness. This panic was naturally because they actually dared to use their destruction sacred art on Luo Fan. They were excited because Luo Fan's appearance proved that their journey of more than 1,300 years had come to an end. How could they not be excited? Luo Fan smiled and stopped the man and dragon from begging for forgiveness. No need to be so polite. Stand to the side. I still have things to do. Yes, Guling said with an ashamed expression and carefully stood to the side with Sky Dragon Ancestor. At this moment, Luo Fan didn't condense a magic cloud to support the three of them like before. Therefore, the three of them were floating in the air, looking rather unstable. During the time that Luo Fan, Guling, and old ancestor Sky Dragon met, the mountain range with a radius of 100,000 miles had already risen to a height of 1,000,000 feet. It was only 500,000 zhong away from Luo Fan and the others who were thousands of li above the sky. The mountain range had already stabilized after rising to this height. However, it was only a height. After rising to this height, the vitality on the mountain range had already increased to an unimaginable level. The incomparably dense vitality filled the world, and could even be said to cover the sky and earth. It stood under Luo Fan's feet like a blazing sun, causing Luo Fan, who was thousands of miles above, to feel his body being scorched. Although the mountain range was 1,000,000 zhong high, only the 5 peaks in the 5 directions with the small valley and the small pond as the center reached this height. After the mountain range emitted vitality like a blazing sun, the entire mountain range shook slightly. The rustling sound shook the heaven and earth. Then, the countless water yuan essence that rushed out of the small pond grew rapidly and expanded continuously. In the blink of an eye, a figure that was tens of thousands of zhong tall appeared in the void. This figure was completely formed by the water yuan essence tentacles, but it was vivid and lifelike. It was completely a transparent image of a burly man. Looking at this change, Luo Fan's heart shook, and in the blink of an eye, A look of understanding appeared on his face. Although Luo Fan had never seen the image of the burly man outlined by the water yuan essence tentacles, he was extremely familiar with it. That was Pangu. The image of this burly man was impressively the appearance of Pangu that he saw in the various messages left by Pangu's original spirit after it dissipated. As expected, it was born from Pangu's ear bone. It seems that the inheritance of Pangu is 100 times more than that of ordinary innate gods. Such thoughts flashed in Luo Fan's mind. After the figure of this 100,000 zhang tall man was outlined, the entire mountain range with a radius of 100,000 li finally came to life. The strong vitality that was as strong as the blazing sun gradually converged into the mountain range, and it was difficult to be noticed. However, from this moment on, it was impossible for any living creature to treat this mountain range as an inanimate object. This was because the whole mountain range was shaking and shrinking at this moment, as if there was a huge heart with supreme power beating inside, providing some kind of incredible power to the whole mountain range. As the inside of the mountain range throbbed and trembled, the appearance of the mountain range gradually changed. The layers of rocks, soil, and vegetation on the surface of the mountain range gradually collapsed and gradually turned into rolling smoke that slowly dissipated. The true appearance of the mountain range was finally fully revealed. There were a large number of jagged stone pillars of different heights. These stone pillars were not completely regular, but they were all in the shape of sharp cones, like huge awls rising from the ground. At the center of the mountain range, the small pond had already become an ellipsoid, a water ball that occupied an area of 1,000 square kilometers. Under this water ball, a large number of sharp cone-shaped stone pillars rushed out from the bottom and were attached to this water ball. The water essence tentacles that formed Pangu's body were condensed in this water ball. With the true eyes of sun and moon, Luo Fan could easily see that these sharp cone-shaped stone pillars were emitting waves of mysterious power, condensing and transforming this water ball, and the water essence tentacles were formed under this process of condensation and transformation. Using the power of water and earth to condense and stimulate vitality, then convert it into spiritual consciousness and condense supreme power. This is indeed a fantastic idea. Without the inheritance of Pangu, it is absolutely impossible to achieve. Luo Fan had long known about the secrets of this creature's life, but when he saw it with his own eyes, he still couldn't help but praise. The stone pillars below were of different sizes. The larger ones were the 5 stone pillars that were 1,000,000 zhang tall and tens of thousands of zhang in diameter, while the smaller ones were only a few hundred zhang tall. There was a huge difference between them. However, each stone pillar was unique, and they were either subtly or greatly different from the other stone pillars. These stone pillars of different sizes were very mysterious in number, and when added together, they formed the number of 10 yuan, or 1,296,000. The structure of these 10 yuan stone pillars was very mysterious. It formed a mysterious formation that seemed to be natural, yet not natural, like man-made, yet not man-made. It emitted a breathtaking aura, as if it had the power to destroy heaven and earth. "Master, what is this?" At this moment, Gu Ling, who had been watching the changes, asked in astonishment. "This is an innate god born from Pangu's ear bone." Luo Fan did not hide and said directly. Gu Ling and the others were unlucky to be able to awaken this innate god, but it could also be regarded as their opportunity. They naturally had the right to know the nature of this innate god. Pangu's ear bone. When Gu Ling heard this, his expression changed slightly, and he turned his head to look at Old Ancestor Sky Dragon. At this moment, Old Ancestor Sky Dragon also turned his head to look at him. The two of them looked at each other, their faces filled with doubt, panic, and even worry. "That's right. What you took out from the pool was Pangu's ear bone." Luo Fan did not turn back to look at them, but he easily noticed the change in their expressions and said directly, "Ah." When Gu Ling heard this, he cried out in surprise. Previously, When Luo Fan used the sun and moon true eyes to examine the nature of the mountain below, his eyes looked back in time and directly saw what Gu Ling and the others had done on the mountain. He knew where the conflict between them and the innate god in the shape of the mountain came from. So that's how it is. No wonder there were so many tentacles when I picked up this thing. Gu Ling raised her hand and took out a strange object from her body. This thing was quite large, with a radius of 10 feet. It was made of bone and was divided into 3 parts. The largest of which was like a cuttlefish chopping board, but this chopping board had 2 long branches that looked like forks, which looked very strange. Near the middle of the 2 branches of the chopping board-like bone, there was a hammer-shaped protrusion. At the end of the long branch of the chopping board, there was another bone in the shape of a stirrup. Apart from the size of the object, it looked like an ordinary bone on the surface. However, if one took a closer look, they would find that this bone was not simple. On the surface of this bone, there was a layer of light that even Luo Fan could only see with the sun and moon true eyes. This layer of light was condensed by billions of invisible scattered lights, and it was not simply condensed. Instead, it seemed to be condensed by various mysterious formations and magical talismans. Under this layer of light, the bone was extremely dense and condensed. Even the toughest thing that Luo Fan had ever seen could not compare to 1/10,000th of this bone. This skeleton was placed here so naturally, it made people feel that it was impossible to break it with any force. It was even more mysterious than the innate, inextinguishable spiritual light. Luo Fan activated the sun and moon true eyes, trying hard to continue looking inside. But he found that no matter how hard he tried, he could not break through the layer of light formed by billions of scattered lights and go deep into the bone. It seemed that this layer of light could isolate all peeping eyes. This is indeed Pan Gu's ear bone. Seeing this, Luo Fan wasn't disappointed at all. On the contrary, he was quite happy. If he could easily see through this Pan Gu's ear bone, he would be disappointed. At this moment, it showed how mysterious the panga bone was. Shifu, this bone is so precious, but I dare not to keep it. Therefore, I offer it to you. Shifu, please accept it. Seeing Luo Fan looking at Pan Gu's ear bone, Gu Ling hurriedly said. Luo Fan smiled, shook his head, and said, "Since you found this bone, it is your fortune. How can I take away my disciple's fortune? However, this thing itself is useless to me, but the mystery it contains is quite beneficial to me. Fine, I will refine this into a magic tool for you and study it." With that, Luo Fan took the Pan Gu's ear bone. He originally thought that this object would be extremely heavy, but when he touched it, it felt unexpectedly light. It was as if a piece of white paper had been cut into millions of layers to form a thin piece of paper. He even felt that the slight fluctuation of vitality could allow this object to travel in the sky for countless years. Moreover, countless vibrations came from this ear bone. It was as if there were all kinds of indescribable sounds that could not be heard by living beings coming from the void, from the world, from the supreme Tao, and were received by this ear bone. In the end, these sounds were drawn into the ear bone, and changes that even Luo Fan couldn't understand happened. Sensing this change, Luo Fan finally showed a slight shock on his face. He had already thought about the mysteries of this Pan Gu's ear bone, but now that he held it in his hand, he found that it was even more mysterious than he had imagined. This sound seems to be the sound of the world, the sound of the great Tao. If I can understand its mystery, I might be able to create a magic to cultivate Pan Gu's ear. This thought flashed across Luo Fan's mind. Although it disappeared immediately, it had already left a mark deep in his heart. "Since this thing is useful to you, Master, just take it." "Master, I've been greatly indebted to you. No matter how precious this ear bone is, it is not as good as your kindness," said Gu Ling. These words came from the bottom of his heart. To Gu Ling, Luo Fan had given him a new life. He had given him the opportunity to seek the true Tao and taught him the way to prove his Tao. All these things were countless times more precious than this Pan Gu's ear bone, which he didn't know the use of. If this Pan Gu's ear bone was really important to Luo Fan, He would never be stingy with this seemingly precious thing. Standing aside, Sky Dragon Ancestor's expression didn't change much, but his eyes showed agreement. After all, he was only Guling's mount. Even though Guling treated him like a brother, he couldn't say too much in front of Luo Fan. When Luo Fan heard Guling's words, he faintly smiled and shook his head. He said, "Teacher knows of your filial piety, but your opportunity is your opportunity. Teacher has not fallen to the level of snatching my disciple's opportunity. You don't need to say that again." Chapter 402. Single divine ability, devouring light. Just as Luo Fan put the Pangu's ear bone into the world in the sleeve, the Pangu formed by the water origin essence below let out a shrill and furious roar. The voice contained endless indignation, as well as the hatred of having its most precious thing snatched away. Luo Fan did not care at all. The Pangu's ear bone was the catalyst for the birth of the innate god. Without the Pangu's ear bone, the innate god could not have existed. Correspondingly, the Pangu's ear bone was equivalent to the innate god's parents. It was the most precious existence. At this moment, the Pangu's ear bone had been put into the world in the sleeve, and all its connections with the untainted world had been cut off. The innate god had lost its connection with the Pangu's ear bone, so it would be strange if it was not angry. The entire forest of conical stone pillars with a radius of 100,000 miles shook. Then, the water ball with a diameter of 1,000 miles suddenly shook and instantly exploded, covering the entire forest of conical stone pillars with a radius of 100,000 miles, which was the huge mountain range from before. The speed at which the water ball exploded had reached an astonishing level. In the blink of an eye, it had turned into a thin film covering the conical stone pillars with a radius of 100,000 miles. It looked like the conical stone pillars suddenly had a layer of light blue skin. At the same time, the Pangu form formed by the water origin essence tentacles shook and rushed up, pouncing towards Luo Fan. The moment it rushed up, the huge mountain range also left the ground and rushed towards Luo Fan. As the mountain left the ground, a bottomless abyss appeared below. It was pitch black and filled with endless, baleful Yin-Chi. In fact, there were even countless earth fire surging below. Luo Fan's true eyes of sun and moon had the ability to see through all barriers and formations. Through the vast distance, he saw the yellow springs flowing in the depths. It's rooted above the nether springs and relies on the boundless heavy and turbid Yin-Chi within the nether springs to cultivate, yet doesn't rely on the chaotic vitality energy to cultivate. It's truly unconventional. No wonder it was able to conceal itself from me for such a long time. Luo Fan's thoughts spun, and he'd already understood the source of this innate god strength. When the innate god lunged forward, the Pangu formed from the water essence tentacles shuddered slightly, and a bright light flashed behind him. With a twist and a twist, it swept towards Luo Fan like a huge fan. That light was 1,000 times purer than the light that had swept towards Guling and old ancestor Sky Dragon previously. And its momentum was even greater. As the light swept across the void, all of the Yuan Chi, be it Xintian Yuan Chi, Hundun Yuan Chi, Star Essence Chi, Great Sun Essence, True Sun Fire, Lunar Essence, Astral Baleful Chi, and so on and so forth. Everything disappeared. All of them were fused into the light. Looking at the light, Luo Fan's eyes flickered with golden and silver light. In the blink of an eye, he'd already seen through the essence of the light. The light was extremely mysterious. Although anyone could tell that it was a light, no one could tell what color it was. It was as if any color could be used to describe the light, but no one could really tell what color it was. It was as if any color could be used to describe the light, but none of them were appropriate. The light seemed to be pure and condensed, sparkling and translucent, and one could even see through the light to see what was behind it. But in fact, the internal structure of the light was extremely complicated and abstruse. There were a total of 1,296,000 layers of light inside the light beam. Each layer was formed by endless mysterious runes piled up and linked together according to some complicated rules. When the light moved, the 1,296,000 layers of runes moved rapidly, bursting out an unimaginably abstruse power, swallowing and dispersing all matter that was swept by, turning them into pure energy or flow of matter that integrated into the light. After the energy or flow of matter integrated into the light, it didn't strengthen or increase the size or power of the light. Instead, through some mysterious transformation and transfer, it finally turned to the stone forest below, which was the body of the innate god, strengthening his body. No wonder it grew so huge. It's a pity that it took the wrong path. Luo Fan looked at it and finally understood why the innate god grew so deformed after being stimulated by Pangu's ear bone. The untainted world was vast and almost endless. It had rich yuan qi and numerous heavenly materials and earthly treasures. It had reached a level that no living creature could imagine. Such rich resources were enough for an innate god to grow to the size of millions of miles. However, the innate gods in the untainted world, no matter how much Pangu's primordial spirit inheritance they had inherited, and no matter how high their cultivation levels were, their original bodies were at most tens of thousands of feet tall, let alone the innate gods who had refined their original bodies to the size of 100,000 miles. The reason for this situation was naturally not that the innate gods had not thought of it, nor was it that they couldn't find the resources, but that it was not necessary at all. If living creatures wanted to cultivate and pursue the Tao, they naturally had to conform to the rules of the world. The untainted world was created by Pangu. In this untainted world, the best body for cultivating and pursuing the Tao was the body of Pangu, which was also the innate Taoist body, the current body of Luo Fan. Therefore, if living creatures wanted to truly obtain the Tao that surpassed everything, have an immortal life, and possess the power to destroy the world, to a certain extent, they had to transform their body into the innate Taoist body. For the innate gods, the price-performance ratio of strengthening their body was too low. Just like the innate god in front of Luo Fan at this moment, he had grown his body to the size of 100,000 miles. It looked so shocking, but if he transferred the energy and matter that strengthened his body to the innate Taoist body, he could at least reach the realm of true immortality. Even the realm of golden immortality would not be wishful thinking. How could he just be an existence that could not even achieve the Tao and only had a huge body? This body looks strong, but in fact, the further it is from the Tao, the more difficult it will be to achieve the innate Taoist body in the future. It's a pity that the fortune of Pangu's ear bone was wasted. Luo Fan sighed and said to Gu Ling, "Because of a wrong decision, this result has been caused. You must remember this lesson in the future." Disciple understands. At this moment, Gu Ling was trembling with fear. There was a hint of fear on her face, but she still nodded. Ancestor Sky Dragon, who was next to him, also had a bad look on his face. Obviously, to the man and the dragon, the power of the innate god in front of them had shocked them, and they were terrified. They did not dare to doubt what Luo Fan had said, but they could not hide the changes in their minds. Luo Fan naturally knew the changes in their minds, but he did not care. At this moment, it did not matter if they could not believe it. As long as they watched the battle later, they would naturally be able to change their minds. With a thought, he raised his hand and gently patted down. The void suddenly changed, and, as the space was slightly distorted, a shadow of a palm came out from Luo Fan's hand. This shadow of the palm was initially only the size of Luo Fan's palm, but after it left his palm, it expanded crazily. Although the shadow of the palm was only a shadow, it was extremely real. It looked like a real palm. Down to the fine details, palm lines, pores, everything was exactly the same as Luo Fan's palm. The shadow of the palm blasted downwards, and when it came into contact with the light, it had already expanded to a radius of 10,000 miles, covering the sky and earth, and came into contact with the light of the same size. The moment the two came into contact, there was a thunderous explosion. The sound was earth-shattering, and even the astral wind, lightning, and fire layer above 90,000 miles churned. Even the barrier of the astral wind, lightning, and fire layer was almost shattered by the sound, causing the astral wind, lightning, and fire to pour down. That innate deity had been wholeheartedly cultivating that ray of light for hundreds of thousands of years, to the extent that he was even unwilling to put any of his energy into other magic arts. Thus, that ray of light was the only thing he could use until now. However, in front of Luo Fan, this ray of light was so weak. After the shadow of the palm collided with the light, although there was an earth-shattering sound, it didn't even shake. It directly crushed the light layer by layer, shattering it inch by inch. Under the pressure of the palm, the 1,296,000 layers of runes in the light were like sand piled up, constantly turning into specks of light that poured down. You stole my opportunity to achieve Tao and destroyed my Tao attainment divine ability. You deserve to die. Seeing this, the Pangu formed by the water origin essence roared. Along with this roar, the stone forest and the Pangu formed by the water origin essence directly collided with the palm that was 10,000 miles in radius, ignoring the constantly collapsing light. Although the palm was 10,000 miles in radius, it was still too small compared to the innate god's body, which was 10,000 miles in radius. The tallest stone pillars of the innate god's body happened to be at the edge of the 5 directions. They just happened to pass through the obstruction of the palm and stabbed upwards. The 5 huge stone pillars were at least 1,000,000 feet tall, and the distance between the palm and Luo Fan was only 100 miles. Therefore, when the palm came into contact with the Pangu formed by the water origin essence and the valley below, Luo Fan, Guling, and old ancestor Tianlong had already entered the range of the innate god's body. At this moment, the water origin Pangu seemed to have a smile on his face, and there was even a trace of relief in his eyes. The layer of water that covered the entire mountain range suddenly shuddered, and billions of tentacles grew out of it, all of which rushed toward Luo Fanmeng from all directions. These tentacles did not spread in a straight line in the void, but spread in a very mysterious and complicated way, as if they were outlining abstruse runes in the void. When Luo Fan saw this, he knew that these tentacles were imitating the structure of the 1,296,000 layers of runes inside the light. They wanted to construct another kind of strange rune, and with the help of these runes, they wanted to directly shred Luo Fan and absorb him. You're a little clever, but you've gone the wrong way. Luo Fan sighed. The hand squeezed slightly. In the blink of an eye, the gigantic palm silhouette clenched its fist and crushed the light, as well as the Pangu formed from the tentacles of water essence. The huge explosion was earth-shattering, and it was even more shocking and louder than the sound of the light being broken. At this moment, the astral wind, thunder, and fire layer above 90,000 miles broke open a big hole without any stagnation. The overwhelming astral wind, thunder, and fire fell from the sky, bypassing Luo Fan, and directly pounced on the innate gods in a radius of 100,000 miles. Then Luo Fan stretched out his hand and slapped down. The palm directly passed through the layer of skin-like water and slapped the innate god's body. In an instant, the world flipped. More than 100,000 of the mountain-like stone pillars that grew on the innate god's body were instantly smashed into pieces. Where the palm slapped down, a palm-shaped flat ground instantly appeared. The water that was originally at the location of the palm was directly slapped and splashed in all directions, like a heavy downpour falling in all directions. A shrill roar came from the innate god's body, which was the mountain range with a radius of 100,000 kilometers. The countless water elemental essence tentacles that rushed out from the 5 largest stone pillars also shook violently in an instant. They were completely stagnant in an instant, unable to move any further, let alone continue to approach Luo Fan. Many of the tentacles even collapsed, turning back into flowing water and falling down. However, Even at this time, Luo Fan did not stop, and the palm was still pressing down. As the palm pressed down, the power of the palm's shadow suddenly increased by 10,000 times. It directly pressed down the mountain range with a radius of 100,000 kilometers. The speed at which it fell was more than 10 times faster than the speed at which it rose. In the blink of an eye, it crossed thousands of kilometers and crashed into the deep pit below. As it fell, a muffled sound came from the ground, and a strong shock spread for the mountain range with a radius of 100,000 kilometers in all directions. Countless mountains and rocks, the ground turned into powder under the shock. Countless flowers and trees were twisted into pieces, and rivers flowed backward. The mountain range was directly smashed into the deep pit. Moreover, it was directly smashed thousands of kilometers underground, and even the stone pillars that were millions of meters tall were only tens of thousands of meters above the ground. Crack, 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 crack. The sound was so loud that it could be heard from thousands of kilometers away, constantly coming from a mountain range with a radius of 100,000 kilometers. The huge palm's shadow slowly faded away. Around the palm, countless cracks gradually appeared like spiderwebs. These cracks expanded extremely fast, and from the moment they first appeared to the moment they expanded to a radius of 100,000 kilometers, it only took a few breaths of time to envelop the entire mountain range. Shrill screams kept coming from the mountain range, and the endless screams were extremely horrifying. It even produced extremely rich resentment chi that soared into the sky. However, the resentment chi that soared into the sky was smashed by the strong wind, thunder, and fire that covered the sky above and directly rolled back. After smashing the resentment chi, the strong wind, thunder, and fire continued to fall, directly bombarding the body of the innate god, which was shaped like a mountain. These strong wind, thunder, and fire were quite fatal to ordinary creatures, or even ordinary innate gods, newly born innate gods who had not cultivated before. But for such a powerful innate god, who could temper a body with a radius of 100,000 kilometers, it should be like an attack that scratched an itch. But at this time, the countless cracks that covered the body of the innate god went deep into the core of the innate god. These strong wind, thunder, and fire that were like scratching an itch were like the last straw that broke the camel's back, directly causing the mountain range with a radius of 100,000 kilometers to collapse. The stone pillars that had been smashed by Luo Fan's palm and survived instantly collapsed, turning into tiny sand-like existences that poured down. After all, the hole in the layer of strong wind, thunder, and fire was only caused by the surging sound, and was not caused by any mysterious power. Therefore, although it was very large, it could not last long. It only appeared for a few breaths, and under the self-repair effect of the layer of strong wind, thunder, and fire, it closed again. Therefore, there was only one wave of strong wind, thunder, and fire that poured down. When this wave of strong wind, thunder, and fire hit the body of the innate god, it completely shattered, and the world became clear again. At this time, Gu Ling, an old ancestor sky dragon, who were above, really saw the changes below. At this time, the man and the dragon could not help but open their mouths, and their eyes revealed a look of disbelief. Below them, the original mountain range with a radius of 100,000 kilometers had completely disappeared. It was replaced by a huge sandpit with a radius of 100,000 kilometers. This sandpit was inverted conical, and there was no sand in it that was larger than the size of a thumb, as if it had been crushed dozens of times by the most delicate grinding equipment. There was a mountain range here, just now. Gu Ling said with a blank look in his eyes. In the untainted world, the geographical scale of tens of thousands of kilometers, hundreds of thousands of kilometers, millions of kilometers, or even hundreds of millions of kilometers made people feel that 100,000 kilometers was nothing. It should be known that a football field was less than 100 meters in circumference. Even the motherland of Luo Fan's previous life was less than 10 million square kilometers, which was only 200,000 kilometers in circumference from this. It could be seen just how huge the area of 100,000 miles was. Just now, Luo Fan had only padded 3 times, and the huge mountain range with a radius of 100,000 kilometers had been turned into a sandpit. Even though Gu Ling was once the consciousness of the myriad bones rebirth heaven, the spirit of all living things, an old ancestor sky dragon was once the #1 person in the supreme dragon emperor heaven. He could not help but be shocked by the huge change in front of him. Naturally, Luo Fan would not be so bored as to care about the emotional changes of the man and the dragon. Chapter 403. Ancient spirit returns to imperfection. The blue liquid continued to gather in the sand pit. Soon, a lake gradually formed at the bottom of the barren sand pit. More and more water essence tentacles appeared in the lake, sometimes gathering and sometimes dispersing. There were also many messy, unsystematic runes condensing and dispersing in the lake. From the looks of it, there seemed to be some sort of existence struggling within. Luo Fan was not moved by this. His right hand remained in a grabbing position. When the lake had gathered to a radius of 10,000 feet, he raised his hand. The water that seeped out from every corner of the sandpit and accumulated at the bottom of the sandpit suddenly trembled. Like a light object, it suddenly left the ground. Not long after, it left the bottom of the sandpit and turned into a ball of water with a diameter of 10,000 feet. Not long after, it arrived in front of Luo Fan. After the ball of water left the sandpit, it struggled even more violently like a fish out of water. Moreover, the unsystematic runes that flickered in it became more numerous and scattered at a faster rate. Even the twisted tentacles of water essence that gathered and scattered increased in number. They twisted faster and faster. With this bit of time to buffer, Gu Ling and Patriarch Sky Dragon had already recovered. Although their expressions were a bit complicated and shocked, it was not as intense as before. Condense. With a thought, Luo Fan opened his mouth and let out a soft cry. Following this shout, the ball of water that was over 100,000 feet in diameter abruptly began to condense into a humanoid shape. A human figure that was 10,000 feet tall and shaped like Pangu. Even the twisting tentacles of water essence in the water ball seemed to have been controlled by a powerful force. In the blink of an eye, it had become the same as when the innate god had condensed his own water essence to form the figure of Pangu. It was incomparably sturdy, outlining the extremely stable figure of Pangu. However, those unsystematic and messy runes were still scattered all over Pangu's body, showing no signs of improvement. What do you want?" Pangu's figure floated in the void for a while in a daze. Then, he narrowed his eyes and questioned Luo Fan. These words came as a matter of course. To him, these people were robbers who robbed him of his fortune. Not only did they take away Pangu's ear bone, which had catalyzed his growth, but they also directly destroyed his body, turning his body, which had taken him hundreds of thousands of years to grow into such a strong body, into powder. At this moment, he grabbed his spirit sense, which was about to be destroyed along with his body, and used some kind of divine ability to dissolve this spirit sense into the water essence, saving him from the fate of death. This was really confusing, and no one could figure out what he wanted to do. Luo Fan smiled, but did not reply. His right hand made a grabbing motion towards the giant in front of him. In the blink of an eye, the giant rapidly shrank down. Soon, it had shrunk to 10,000 times from its original height and became a strong man who was 10 feet tall. As it shrank, the strong man's body became much denser, and his originally crystal clear appearance became like blue jade. It looked like it was made of rock, but it was no longer as crystal clear as before, and no one could tell that it was only made of water essence. "It's normal to speak like this," Luo Fan said with a slight smile. "What do you want to do?" The strong man with the appearance of Pangu was shocked, but he still asked persistently. "I will take your Pangu's ear bone and give you an opportunity to achieve the Tao. If you are willing, I will send you to the place to seek the Tao. What do you think?" Luo Fan smiled. "What if I am not willing?" The strong man's eyes flashed with anger, and his body trembled violently. Obviously, he was extremely angry. "If you are not willing, I will destroy your spiritual consciousness and let you return to heaven and earth to end the karma between you and me." Luo Fan was still smiling. "You, The strong man with the appearance of Pan Gu widened his eyes, and his look of disbelief could even be seen by a fool. Luo Fan looked at the strong man with the appearance of Pan Gu with a smile, and his expression did not change at all, as if he was patiently waiting for the innate god in front of him to make a decision. Luo Fan seemed to be very friendly, but the strong man only felt a chill in his heart, as if an indescribable danger was emanating from the person in front of him. It was as if he gave a wrong answer, what awaited him would be the destruction of his soul, and he would never be able to reincarnate. Such a strong sense of danger instantly extinguished the anger in the heart of the innate god. In an instant, countless images flashed through his mind, and the scene where Luo Fan destroyed his body and grabbed his spiritual consciousness flashed before his eyes again. The innate god finally understood his current situation. Although he was extremely unwilling and angry, he still said, "I am willing to go to the place to seek the Tao." His words were spoken through gritted teeth, and it was obvious that he was extremely unhappy, but he reluctantly agreed because of the situation. However, Luo Fan did not seem to hear it at all. He smiled and said, "That's great. Since you are willing to go to the place to seek the Tao, then you can be my Tao friend." As he spoke, he raised his hand and pointed, and a door of light about 3 feet high appeared in front of him. The door of light slowly opened, and what was revealed was another very mysterious world. "Tao friend, please." After the door of light opened, Luo Fan raised his hand and made a gesture of invitation. Although the innate god who looked like Pan Gu was forced by Luo Fan, he was still very surprised when he discovered the magical power in front of him that was beyond his imagination. He even felt a sense of admiration for Luo Fan. He was too lazy to talk to Luo Fan and directly stepped into the door of light in front of him. As he stepped into the door of light shook slightly and disappeared in the blink of an eye. After the innate god entered the door of light, he found that he had come to a whole new world. This world was high and vast. Although the primordial chi was not as strong as that of the untainted world, it was considered rich. Although the strength of the space was not as strong as that of the untainted world, it was considered solid. And most importantly, the flow of time in this world seemed to be different from that of the untainted world. It seemed to be 365 times faster than the untainted world. What kind of place is this? Why does it have such a mysterious characteristic? The innate god stood on the ground and turned his head to look around. His eyes were filled with incomparable confusion. Cultivating in this world seems to be much better than cultivating in the untainted world. What does this person mean? Why would he be so kind as to give me better cultivation conditions? The confusion in the innate god's heart was so strong that it was almost uncontrollable. Although the body condensed by Luo Fan's magic power was very similar to the incarnation of Pan Gu that the innate god had originally condensed, it was more than 10,000 times stronger than the incarnation that he had condensed. Although it was worlds apart from his original body, it was also a rather strong body. With such a strong and tough body, the loss of the innate god's original body was reduced by more than 10%. Although it was still far from his original body, the loss was not as great as he had imagined. What is going on? The innate god was still confused. But very soon, he woke up and his eyes lit up. "Forget it. Since you dare to let me in, I will cultivate the divine light again and directly devour this world to strengthen myself. How dare you take away my opportunity to achieve the Tao?" With that thought in mind, he did not care where he was right now. He sat down cross-legged and focused his mind, continuously gathering the runes that were scattered and unsystematic in his body. He continuously condensed them in his body and stacked them up. Although there were many runes, they were after all not as many as the billions of runes that formed the original light. When the innate god condensed the runes in one place, they only condensed a layer of runes. The light was only 1/1, 296,000th complete. Although it is only one layer, I have the foundation and can absorb the primordial chi. The innate god showed a hideous smile. With a smile, he raised his hand and pointed a finger. There was a faint, hazy light that seemed to exist yet not exist at the same time. It suddenly rushed out from his finger and condensed into a beam of light that was 30 feet tall. After the ray of light condensed, he threw it behind him. The light directly left his finger and came to the back of his head. Like hair, it stuck to the back of his head and spread out, changing from the original light beam's shape to the shape of a fan. After the light spread out, it became thinner and more fragile. The innate God did not care. With a thought, the light expanded 100 times and swept forward, directly sweeping the sky within a radius of 1,000 feet. Just when he wanted to enjoy the pleasure of the light, absorbing the endless primordial chi to nourish himself, his expression suddenly changed. How vicious! He suddenly let out an extremely sad and angry roar. The structure of this light was no different from the light that he had researched for hundreds of thousands of years. In fact, because he had already experienced it once, the structure of this light was even more perfect and natural. However, this light's original ability to absorb energy and nourish himself was not at all. This ray of light was like an ordinary ray of light. It was unable to absorb any of the yuan qi in the void. What a place for me to seek the Tao, but I can't even absorb the primordial qi. What kind of place is this to seek the Tao? What kind of place is this to seek the Tao? The innate God put away the light, pointed to the sky, and cursed. This world was naturally the medium-class world inside the Void Wuji Palace. The entire Void Wuji Palace was under the complete control of Luo Fan. If Luo Fan wanted to make the innate God unable to use that divine power, it was naturally easy for him to do so. Since Luo Fan already knew that the innate God had that divine power, how could he not make preparations so that the innate God could use this divine power without reservation? Therefore, after sending the innate God into the medium-class world, he directly changed the rules of the medium-class world with a thought, so that the divine power could not absorb any primordial chi and matter from the medium-class world. At this time, the innate God's divine power had only been completed by 296,000. Even if it was tens of thousands of times stronger than when it was completed, it would not be able to absorb any primordial chi and matter from the medium-class world. After sending the innate God into the Void Wuji Palace, Luo Fan had no time to pay attention to him. But at this time, he still heard the innate God cursing at the sky. He couldn't help but smile and said, "This is the place to seek the Tao. If you can use this divine power, why do you still need to seek the Tao?" These words were spoken in a normal tone. But in this dimensional realm, it was like thunder roaring from the highest heavens, like the sound of the great Tao. It was like the entire dimensional realm was roaring, shaking the heavens and shaking the earth, stirring the soul. Such a violent sound could only be heard by the innate God, and it could only shake his mind. When the innate God heard what Luo Fan said, his body shrank slightly, but after a while, he straightened his body again and cursed at the sky. Bullsh asterisk T. I need this divine power to seek the Tao. Without this divine power, what Tao can I seek? What Tao can I seek? Let go of the innate God. Let me devour this world first. When Luo Fan heard the innate God's arrogance, he just shook his head and cut off his perception of the medium-class world. At this time, Guling said carefully, "Teacher, why did you send it to the place to seek the Tao? Why not just kill it?" At this time, Guling said carefully. When Luo Fan heard Guling, he turned around and found that Guling was purely curious, without any doubt. He smiled and said, "It's not easy for this spirit to grow up, but to be able to cultivate such a divine power, even though it has taken the wrong path, it is still deeply blessed by the heaven and earth. It's fine to take the Pangu's ear bone, but if you kill it, there will be many inconveniences, and you will have to bear great karma, which is not good." I see, disciple understands. Guling was confused, but he still understood what Luo Fan meant, that killing this innate God would hinder his future, so he bowed and said. Luo Fan, of course, knew that Guling didn't know what he meant, but he didn't care. As long as Guling remembered these words, it would be enough for him to be a little careful when he did things in the future. As for the true meaning of these words today, he would naturally be able to understand it when he improved his cultivation level in the future, so there was no need to say more now. With a thought, the void naturally changed, and an auspicious cloud with a radius of 30 feet formed beneath him. Although this auspicious cloud was also formed from the void, and the way it was formed was as mysterious as before, even more mysterious, but didn't have the same strange phenomenon as before. It looked just like an ordinary auspicious cloud. The undulations and changes of the lines on the auspicious cloud were still like the evolution of the great Tao of heaven and earth and the mysteries of nature, but it was more profound, more obscure, and more difficult to notice. This was the result of Luo Fan's great improvement in cultivation level after he obtained the incarnation of the living creature from Julie Great World, which could open up a Taoist field in the chaos. After commanding the heaven and earth, he could control the natural changes of heaven and earth more perfectly. Therefore, there naturally weren't as many strange phenomena appearing. After the clouds appeared, old ancestor Sky Dragon stared at the clouds below him. He wanted to understand some principles from it like before, but it was a pity that the mystery on the auspicious cloud was too profound and too difficult to understand. With old ancestor Tianlong's cultivation level, he could only see that the auspicious cloud was more mysterious than before, and could only see that the mystery hidden on the auspicious cloud was more profound, but he couldn't understand it at all. After watching for a long time, old ancestor Tian Long couldn't help showing a look of irritation on his face, and anxiety flashed in his eyes. Luo Fan saw it, but he didn't care at all. After all, old ancestor Sky Dragon was just a mount. The mysteries were laid out in front of him. If he could comprehend some of the principles, it would be his opportunity. If he could not, he would not be so kind as to let him comprehend. What was the difference between that and personally teaching him? Old ancestor Tian Long's identity wasn't enough for Luo Fan to do this. Luo Fan didn't change his expression. With a thought, the auspicious cloud dragged the three of them toward Buzhou Mountain at a speed faster than anything else. From here to Buzhou Mountain is already under my control, and there are many innate gods walking here. There's no point in traveling anymore. Follow me to Buzhou Mountain, Luo Fan said to Guling next to him. Yes. Guling didn't notice old ancestor Tian Long's irritation and depression at all, but he said excitedly. They were about 300 million miles away from Buzhou Mountain. Even though Buzhou Mountain was unusually tall, they could only see a blurry shadow, and they couldn't see the true appearance of Buzhou Mountain at all. At that moment, when they heard that they could directly go to Buzhou Mountain, which they had been looking forward to for more than 1,000 years, and they could even personally feel the mysterious Buzhou Mountain, how could Guling not be excited? Luo Fan didn't care about Guling's excitement. He controlled the auspicious cloud to fly quickly, and they flew toward Buzhou Mountain at a speed of billions of miles in an instant. In just a few breaths, they had crossed a distance of 300 million miles and arrived at the foot of Buzhou Mountain. He pressed down on the cloud and landed at the foot of Mount Buzhou, right in front of the space-time illusion. The two of them and the dragon landed. Luo Fan was already familiar with Buzhou Mountain, so he naturally didn't feel anything. However, it was the first time Guling and old ancestor Tian Long had seen such a majestic and imposing mountain. At first sight, they couldn't help but feel an indescribable sense of respect and shock. At the same time, the human and the dragon were stirred up by the desolate and unyielding aura emitted from Buzhou Mountain, and their aura changed slightly. So this is Mount Buzhou, Guling blurted out almost unconsciously. Chapter 404. A heavenly tribulation looms above the sea of consciousness. Guling and old ancestor Sky Dragon stood at the foot of Buzhou Mountain. They looked up at Buzhou Mountain and sensed the mysterious aura coming from Buzhou Mountain. However, they were in a daze, and their eyes were slightly dazed. Luo Fan's eyes flickered. He saw a growing and complete Buzhou Mountain in the depths of Guling's eyes. Meanwhile, a divine dragon that was tens of thousands of meters long appeared in old ancestor Sky Dragon's eyes. It was obvious that the man and the dragon had been influenced by Mount Buzhou and had fallen into a state similar to an epiphany. Luo Fan nodded slightly. This was the reason why he brought them here, instead of going directly to the Seeker Cave. Buzhou Mountain was Pangu's spine, the pillar of the northwest. It stood tall and supported the sky of the entire primordial world. It contained endless mysteries and secrets. The moment any living being saw Buzhou Mountain for the first time, it was the best moment to comprehend some mysteries from it. It was the same for Guling, an old ancestor sky dragon. Although they were living beings from other realms and did not inherit Pangu's primordial spirit, they still had the chance to comprehend some mysteries from Buzhou Mountain. If they let it go just like that, it would be a waste of an opportunity. Naturally, Luo Fan would not take it. Luo Fan glanced at the man and dragon. He waved his hand casually, and two light shields enveloped them. There were countless three-dimensional talismans swimming and circulating on the two light shields. They emitted a mysterious aura and contained an unbreakable aura. This was a defensive shield. After setting up the defensive barrier, Luo Fan did not stop. He lifted his foot and took a step forward. In the blink of an eye, he arrived at the Seeker Cave at the top of Buzhou Mountain. He sat cross-legged on the Kong that he had always been cultivating on. The better the aptitude of a creature was, the longer it could stay in the state of enlightenment when it saw Buzhou Mountain, was stimulated by the aura of Buzhou Mountain, and saw the marvelous image of Buzhou Mountain. With the ancient spirit world consciousness, the spirit of all living beings, and the identity of a number one person in the world, one could imagine how outstanding the aptitudes of the man and the dragon were. With this kind of aptitude, it was impossible for him to wake up from the state of enlightenment so quickly when he first saw Buzhou Mountain. According to Luo Fan's estimation, they would have to stay in this state for at least 3 days. Luo Fan naturally didn't feel any pressure standing there and waiting for 3 days, but it wasn't necessary. That was why he set up a barrier to protect them and returned to his Seeker Cave. 3 days later, Luo Fan, who was meditating in the Seeker Cave with his eyes closed, suddenly opened his eyes. His gaze pierced through countless physical obstructions and crossed hundreds of thousands of kilometers of space to look at the foot of Buzhou Mountain. At the foot of Buzhou Mountain, Guling and the heavenly dragon great ancestor underwent changes one after another in an extremely short period of time. Within it, Guling's entire body surged with power. His soul body trembled slightly, and an endless amount of chaotic energy was strongly attracted to him. It frantically surged towards his body, drilling into every inch of his skin and into his body. The power that had already taken shape in his body was quickly twisted and shattered. It turned into pure energy and was absorbed into the fledgling's power, enriching it and strengthening it. The speed at which he absorbed the chaotic energy was more than 10,000 times faster than his usual cultivation speed. Fortunately, the chaotic yuan qi around Mount Buzhou was incomparably dense. Otherwise, with his current absorption rate of the chaotic yuan qi, he would have created a vacuum of yuan qi around his body, resulting in a shocking visual effect. As the boundless chaotic energy surged into his body, a tenacious aura gradually radiated from his body. The golden and silver light in Luo Fan's eyes flickered slightly, instantly illuminating Guling's body inside and out. He saw the essence of Guling's spirit body and the changes in her soul sense. Guling's soul was originally formed by Luo Fan's physical body. It was an existence similar to a spirit. His spiritual consciousness was attached to the soul, but it wasn't like other innate gods in their sea of consciousness. There was no sea of consciousness in his body. His spiritual consciousness was in his head, and it formed a hemispherical shape in his head like a brain. There were also countless ravines on it, making it look extremely complicated and fragile. However, at this moment, his spiritual consciousness started to change. There seemed to be a small space opening up in an aperture between his eyebrows. This space was extremely mysterious. It seemed to exist only in his mind, but it also seemed to exist in reality. With one look, Luo Fan knew that this was the real Mud Pill Palace. When Luo Fan first constructed the spirit body, it already possessed 5 viscera and 6 bowels, as well as all the parts that a connate Tao body should have. After Gu Ling cultivated the soul doctrine for more than 1,000 years, he had already become a real innate Taoism body. Even his dantian, meridians, and the embryonic form of magic power in his meridians were fully equipped. However, his sea of consciousness still hadn't formed yet. The Mud Pill Palace existed in between his eyebrows as an aperture, but there was no void of the sea of consciousness in the depths of the Mud Pill Palace. His spiritual consciousness could only replace the existence of his brain and attach itself to his head. This was natural. The sea of consciousness could only be opened up with a certain level of cultivation. Even a real, innate God had to know how to cultivate to be able to open up the sea of consciousness. Even if the sea of consciousness was opened up, it still needed a long period of cultivation to expand it. Even an innate deity with a complete body and soul would find it difficult to achieve this step, let alone Gu Ling, who only had a soul body. This body seemed to be complete and mysterious, but it was just a soul body, an existence similar to a divine soul. I've finally opened up the sea of consciousness. Looks like this body is about to be completed. Luo Fan looked at this scene and nodded slightly. He was quite satisfied. The soul body was the best body to cultivate the soul spirit Tao validation technique. And the soul spirit Tao validation technique was a mysterious cultivation technique that led directly to the earthly, immortal realm. However, if one wanted to use such a body to attain Tao fruit, they would need to take one more step than other living beings who cultivated the Tao fruit. That was to form a real body and possess everything that a connate Taoism body should have. At this moment, Gu Ling was able to open up his sea of consciousness, and this had already removed one of the obstacles to attaining the earthly, immortal Tao fruit. From today onwards, his cultivation wouldn't be held back by the fact that this body was a soul, and it would instead possess many characteristics that his physical body didn't possess because this body was a soul. When the sea of consciousness was opened up in the Mud Pill Palace, 100 feet above Gu Ling's head, there was suddenly a dense chaotic chi that gathered in one place and turned into a jet black cloud. This cloud was about an acre in size. It did not look big, but it was enough to cover a large area around Gu Ling. This cloud that was formed by the chaotic chi quickly shrank, and endless mysterious changes occurred within it. This change was extremely mysterious, and it contained many great Taos of heaven and earth, as well as magical powers. The sea of consciousness that was opened up in the Mud Pill Palace continued to expand. It gradually produced an extremely powerful suction force that was sucking in the spiritual sense that had formed a hemispherical shape in his head. This spiritual sense was pulled out by the suction force and entered the sea of consciousness. After the spiritual sense entered the sea of consciousness, the speed at which it expanded became even faster. Not long after, it had expanded to a radius of 100 feet. Only at this moment did it seem to have encountered an obstacle that it could not break through, and it completely stopped. Although it was still shaking and trembling, it could not shake the surrounding barrier, and it could not expand by even an inch. When the sea of consciousness completely stopped expanding, Gu Ling's spiritual sense had already completely entered the sea of consciousness, and it formed a blurry, faintly discernible human figure in the center of the sea of consciousness. That appearance was the appearance of Gu Ling. After this human figure appeared, it shook slightly and suddenly opened its eyes. The joy in its eyes could not be suppressed. Finally condensed the spiritual sense again. Gu Ling's spiritual sense laughed out loud. The voice was very mysterious, and it could not be heard by the human ear, but as long as one had spiritual sense, they could hear the voice extremely clearly. Although this was only a spiritual sense, and not a divine soul that all gods possessed, as long as this spiritual sense could be separated, it would one day condense into a divine soul as long as he diligently cultivated according to the cultivation method of the soul-proving Tao technique. And as long as it condensed into a divine soul, the obstacle that prevented him from advancing further would be completely gone. He would also be able to take the opportunity to obtain the earthly, immortal fruit of Wei. It should be known that in the past 1,000 years, Gu Ling had already cultivated this soul-proving Tao technique to an extremely profound level, and the power in his body had also transformed by more than half. He was only one step away from being able to truly transform it into magic power, allowing him to obtain the earthly, immortal fruit of Wei. However, all of this was due to the fact that he did not have a divine soul. Because he did not have a divine soul, his life source was not stable enough to support him in seeking the earthly, immortal fruit of Wei. That was why Gu Ling had been stuck at this stage. Now that this obstacle had disappeared, he only needed to cultivate for a period of time before he could condense his divine soul and obtain the earthly, immortal fruit of Wei. How could he not be happy? At this moment, the transformation of the cloud formed from the chaotic energy in the sky had reached its limit. Countless bolts of lightning appeared in the center of the cloud. These bolts of lightning appeared and tore apart the cloud formed from the chaotic energy. With a loud rumble, they fiercely smashed down towards Gu Ling. At this moment, Gu Ling's heart skipped a beat. His consciousness instantly left his sea of consciousness and returned to his body. He felt the bolt of lightning descending from the sky. I didn't think there would be a heavenly tribulation. Such a thought flashed through Gu Ling's consciousness. However, he did not care. This tribulation cloud was only the size of an acre. Although the lightning was formed from the chaotic energy, its strength was extremely limited, and it could not cause much harm to him. Therefore, Gu Ling merely had a thought. The embryonic form of magic power in his body revolved, and he raised his hand to slap upwards. In an instant, a whirlpool appeared in the palm of his right hand. The speed of the lightning was extremely fast. At this moment, it arrived at the palm of his right hand and directly rushed into the whirlpool. Through the whirlpool, it directly revolved inside Gu Ling's body. In the blink of an eye, it was swallowed by the embryonic form of magic power and went to fill the embryonic form of magic power. The tribulation cloud in the sky did not stop. After the bolt of lightning was sent out, it rapidly rotated and giant bolts of lightning shot out from the tribulation cloud. There were thousands of these bolts of lightning. Every single bolt of lightning had a different color and nature compared to the others. It was as if they contained thousands of different attacks. The speed of the lightning was so fast that it was impossible to react. In the blink of an eye, it arrived above Gu Ling's head. Due to a strange force, it entered the whirlpool in Gu Ling's palm. Through the whirlpool, it was swallowed by the embryonic form of magic power. This whirlpool was created by Gu Ling using the embryonic form of magic power. It contained the results of his thousands of years of cultivation and was extremely powerful. However, since the lightning was created by God's retribution, its power was not simple. Therefore, under the bombardment of the lightning, the whirlpool continued to tremble as if it was about to collapse. However, it only seemed like it was about to collapse. The whirlpool still managed to hold on. After 6 hours, the tribulation cloud that was hundreds of meters above Gu Ling's head suddenly condensed into a ball. It flashed with an infinite amount of lightning and pressed down on Gu Ling like a 1,000,000-meter-tall mountain. This is the last wave of attacks. Gu Ling's thoughts moved as he came to a realization. With that thought, the embryonic form of magic power in his body suddenly sped up by 10 times. At the same time, many complex chants began to flow through his mind. After doing this, the whirlpool in his palm suddenly expanded. Its appearance changed in an instant. In an instant, it turned into a giant dragon head that charged out of his palm. With its long dragon body, it headed towards the ball of lightning that was tens of thousands of meters tall. Though the ball of lightning was extremely powerful, it was condensed from clouds that were hundreds of meters in size. At most, it was only 1 meter wide. The dragon head that rushed out of Gu Ling's palm was large enough to swallow it whole. In the blink of an eye, the dragon had already charged into the sky and swallowed the ball of lightning. It bit down and crushed it. This lightning was originally shapeless and intangible. However, after condensing into a ball, it possessed the characteristics of any physical substance. Its hardness was even stronger than a rock that had been tempered by the wind for tens of thousands of years. However, such a sturdy lightning seemed so fragile under the dragon's mouth. It was immediately bitten into countless tiny pieces that were the size of dust particles. The pieces then turned back into shapeless and intangible lightning. It exploded with shocking destructive power and wanted to destroy everything around it. It wanted to smash the dragon into pieces. Gu Ling's body shuddered. Naturally, the result of destroying the ball of lightning was quite impressive. However, at the same time, this method put him under a lot of pressure. He paid a high price for it. The embryonic form of magic power that flowed around his body shook slightly. It seemed like it was about to collapse. At the same time, his soul body twisted and almost collapsed. Blood seeped out of the corner of his mouth, and his indifferent expression became a little mournful. "Withdraw." At this moment, Gu Ling suddenly shouted. Along with this shout, the divine dragon that had charged out from his hand trembled slightly. In an instant, it sucked in the electric light produced by the explosion of the ball of lightning into its body with a loud bang. Its body moved up and down violently. It was as if it had swallowed a bomb that exploded in its body. It was extremely tragic. The dragon's body twisted and struggled madly. After a while, the changes in its body calmed down. It turned around and charged back. In the blink of an eye, it entered Gu Ling's palm and rushed into his body. It was twisted by the embryonic form of magic power that flowed around Gu Ling's body and turned into pure energy that was devoured. It was just that the power of the lightning was too strong. If it was Luo Fan, Luo Fu, or even Luo Chunyang, who had just achieved the earthly immortal realm, this power would not be a problem. It would not even be able to fill up the gap in magic power units. However, to Gu Ling, it was too much. It was so much that he could not digest it or control it. After absorbing the power, the embryonic form of magic power in Gu Ling's body suddenly lost control. It collided and tore at Gu Ling's body. In an instant, Gu Ling's body was torn apart. His meridians were broken and his organs were crushed. Blood gushed out his mouth. The surface of his body was undulating. It looked extremely tragic. "Freeze!" Gu Ling roared. His body suddenly trembled and collapsed, turning into a cloud of mist that spread to a radius of 30 feet, pushing old ancestor sky dragon back 30 feet. In the cloud, there was a dragon-like existence that was moving around crazily, destroying everything. After the cloud spread to a radius of 30 feet, it quickly condensed and shrank rapidly. Gradually, it formed the body of Gu Ling that was 6 feet tall. The 6 feet tall Gu Ling's face was pale, and his body was still trembling. After taking shape, he sat down with his legs crossed and closed his eyes. He tried his best to control the power that was going out of control in his body and put it back on the right track. "He's too greedy," Luo Fan sighed when he saw everything from the Seeker Cave. Naturally, he had seen everything that had happened just now clearly, and he didn't even miss out on the source of the change. If Gu Ling was not a spirit, his body would have been crushed into powder and his soul would have been destroyed. He would never be able to reincarnate. Even though he possessed a spiritual soul body, he had no choice but to expand his body in order to accommodate the destruction of that energy. In order to restore his original body, he would need at least a couple of years of training. Wasting a couple of years for the sake of this energy would not make up for his losses. However, even though he knew this, Luo Fan did not stop Gu Ling. Chapter 405. Great Path of Refining with a Thought. Luo Fan turned to look at old ancestor Tian Long. Old ancestor Tian Long had already retreated to the side. His expression was calm, but there was a trace of worry in his eyes as he looked at Gu Ling, who was sitting cross-legged and had become 6 feet tall. It was the first time old ancestor Tian Long had seen Buzhou Mountain, and his aptitude was excellent. He had also gained many benefits from this experience. Although it was not like Gu Ling, who could remove the last obstacle to attaining the fruit of Tao, he had also made great progress. His body had completed a great transformation and turned into a golden divine dragon. Although he was not an innate god, he was only a little bit away from being an innate god. His essence had improved by a lot. Whether it was his energy capacity or the strength of his body, he was more than 10 times stronger than before. In the words of old ancestor Tian Long, he had truly surpassed the Dragon Emperor and achieved the true great path of the divine dragon. He could also be considered to have truly integrated into the chaos world. Seeing the changes in old ancestor Tian Long, Luo Fan could not help but sigh. If I had met old ancestor Tian Long earlier, I probably wouldn't have had a plan so much for him. Such a thought flashed through Yi Xian's mind. However, opportunity was opportunity. Since it had already been confirmed, it was old ancestor Tian Long's bad luck. Luo Fan did not have the intention to change it. He could only say that old ancestor Tian Long's luck was too bad. After waiting for another 6 hours, Gu Ling finally trembled slightly and completely grasped the embryonic form of the magic power in his body. He absorbed it into his dantian and formed it into a ball. He tried his best to fuse it together to form some kind of mysterious object, but there was always something missing. He had no strength to continue and could not truly take shape. The moment he was about to take shape, he would explode with a bang. After a long time, he sighed and stopped forcefully condensing the earthly immortal Tao fruit. And then he opened his eyes and stood up. Gu Ling looked down at himself, and then at old ancestor Tian Long beside him. He could not help but smile bitterly. I'm still too impatient. I'm afraid that I'll only be able to restore my body when I truly attain Tao fruit. Gu Ling muttered. His body was not considered excessive. Compared to the countless strange appearances of the Khanate gods in the primordial world, it was considered ordinary. Logically speaking, old ancestor Sky Dragon's body grew from a height of less than 10 feet to this appearance, so there should not be too much of a feeling. Unfortunately, his original body was formed by Luo Fan. It was constructed according to the state of his spiritual sense. The proportions of the various parts of his body were also most suitable for his height at that time. At this moment, after being enlarged, the proportions were exactly the same. However, it did not match the body. Although this change didn't affect Gu Ling much, it still had some impact. It couldn't reach a perfect state. If he wanted to prove his Tao fruit, he would need to adjust his body at the last moment. At this moment, Gu Ling seemed to have completely returned to normal. But in reality, there was still a faint feeling of discomfort in her heart. That was why she let out such a sigh. Since the departure of Luo Fan's Dharma treasure, there was no longer any Dharma treasure that prevented living beings from entering or leaving. Therefore, the Khanate gods who cultivated in the illusion of space-time could also enter and exit the illusion of space-time at will. They no longer needed to communicate with Luo Fan to leave or enter the illusion of space-time like before. Therefore, since then, the illusion of space-time had become a public place. Almost every day, many Khanate gods would leave the illusion of space-time to search for some materials they needed to refine weapons and elixirs. There were also many Khanate gods traveling around to look at the primordial world that they had spent endless energy and even their lives to protect. Previously, when Gu Ling, an old ancestor Sky Dragon, stopped in front of the illusion of space-time to have an epiphany or pass the heavenly tribulation, dozens of Khanate gods came in and out. The Khanate gods in the illusion of space-time were at least living beings who had attained the Tao. Almost every one of them was several times stronger than old ancestor Sky Dragon. Even though old ancestor Sky Dragon had made great progress, when these innate gods passed by, Gu Ling didn't feel much, but old ancestor Tian Long saw these innate gods in his eyes and directly felt the boundless aura exuded by these innate gods. He could feel the power fluctuation that could easily crush them. In an instant, the pride of his own strength that he had cultivated for more than 1,000 years was directly shattered. At this moment, old ancestor Sky Dragon had a more direct understanding of his position in the primordial world and knew that he was still extremely weak. Fortunately, there was a defense shield around each of them that had no effect on the heavenly tribulation. Above the defense shield, there was Luo Fan's aura. Although these Khanate gods did not know the identity of the man and the dragon and why they had appeared here, they all knew that they must be related to Luo Fan. After knowing this, these innate gods did not dare to do anything to ancient spirit and old ancestor sky dragon. When they saw the man and the dragon, they would slow down and nod naturally when old ancestor sky dragon glanced at them as a greeting. When Guling woke up and stood up, a middle-aged man in a Taoist robe came from afar on a cloud. The middle-aged man in a Taoist robe looked simple and unadorned. His face was sallow, and his expression was cold and indifferent. The light in his eyes was like ice that could not move him even if the sky fell and the earth cracked. Guling, an old ancestor sky dragon, saw the middle-aged man in a Taoist robe immediately and sensed the aura of the middle-aged man in a Taoist robe. It was a powerful aura that was as deep as the sea and as high as a mountain. Facing this aura, Guling, an old ancestor sky dragon, both felt a kind of indistinct aura that was directly born from the void. It was untraceable, as if it did not exist, but was also incomparably obvious. It made it difficult for them to breathe, and they had to expend dozens of times more energy than before to be able to breathe as naturally as before. This is the realm of individual immortals, and it's the realm of individual immortals that is more than 100 times stronger than old ancestor sky dragon. Guling instantly judged this situation and was shocked. Old ancestor sky dragon's performance was much better than Guling's. After all, he had seen this kind of Khanate god in the realm of individual immortals pass by many times. Even if he was shocked a few times in the past, he was already numb to it. At this time, although he could sense the strength of this person in front of him, he was not moved at all. The Khanate god also saw Guling, an old ancestor sky dragon, at the same time. When he saw them, the middle-aged man in a Taoist robe was slightly stunned and was about to turn his eyes away. But in a second, he stopped as if he had discovered something. A stiff smile appeared on his face, and he nodded to Guling, an old ancestor sky dragon. Guling was slightly stunned. What was this change? After all, old ancestor sky dragon had several experiences, so he quickly returned the greeting. After a while, Guling also returned the greeting. After that, the middle-aged man in a Taoist robe directly passed by them and crashed into the entrance of the space-time illusion, disappearing in front of Guling, an old ancestor sky dragon. What the hell is going on? Why would such a powerful person greet us? Guling asked old ancestor sky dragon in confusion. Old ancestor sky dragon had obviously thought about this question. At this time, hearing Guling's words, he pointed to the faintly discernible defensive cover around him. When Guling saw the defensive cover, he realized that it was also wrapped around him. He couldn't help but come to a sudden realization. So, it's because of Master. No wonder. Master is in the Seeker Cave at the top of the mountain. Come up and collect some materials that you like along the way. At this moment, Luo Fan's indifferent voice suddenly sounded in Guling's ears. Guling couldn't help but shiver when he heard the voice. He quickly bowed at the sky and said, "Yes, Master." Old ancestor sky dragon looked on in confusion. Although he didn't know what exactly happened, he knew that Luo Fan must have given Guling instructions. After Guling bowed and agreed, the voice became silent. Then, the faintly discernible defensive cover that protected Guling and old ancestor sky dragon suddenly collapsed and disappeared without a trace. Guling then stood up and told old ancestor sky dragon about this matter. Knowing this, old ancestor sky dragon naturally followed him up. Immediately, the man and dragon bypassed the space-time illusion and climbed up Buzhou Mountain. Buzhou Mountain was the pillar of the northwest, Pangu's spine. The chaotic chi on it was almost the most concentrated in the primordial world. Although Luo Fu had plundered it countless times tens of thousands of years ago, and almost everything of value had been taken away, countless rare heavenly materials and earthly treasures had been born on Buzhou Mountain after tens of thousands of years of evolution. These heavenly materials and earthly treasures were naturally very ordinary, to Luo Fan. They weren't even worth his time to plunder. However, to Gu Ling, an old ancestor sky dragon, who had traveled the primordial world for more than 1,000 years and collected countless heavenly materials and earthly treasures, they were extremely precious. It almost completely overturned their definition of heavenly materials and earthly treasures. It made them feel like they were on a roller coaster. They even felt that they had been blind in the past. The heavenly materials and earthly treasures that they had collected over the past 1,000 years were simply trash compared to the heavenly materials and earthly treasures that had been born on Buzhou Mountain. I can't believe there's such a heavenly treasure in this world. With just a little bit of refinement, or even a little branding, it can directly become an offensive treasure. Gu Ling was calculating the value of the items he had plundered as he plundered. On Buzhou Mountain, even a piece of sand, a piece of grass, was a rare treasure. No matter how big Gu Ling, an old ancestor sky dragon storage space, was, they couldn't completely plunder all the heavenly materials and earthly treasures. Therefore, even though they were very reluctant, they had only collected less than 1/10,000th of the countless heavenly materials and earthly treasures they had seen when they reached the top of the mountain and arrived in front of the search cave. Among them, they hadn't even found the most precious ones, the remnants left behind by the failed evolution of several innate gods hidden in various secret locations on Buzhou Mountain. When they arrived in front of the search cave, Gu Ling and old ancestor sky dragon were already carrying heavy bags on their hands and backs. There were many heavenly materials and earthly treasures that they couldn't bear to throw away. These are the treasures that they couldn't stuff into their storage space anymore, but they really couldn't bear to give up. Disciple Gu Ling greets Master. After Gu Ling arrived at the search cave, he placed the heavenly materials and earthly treasures to the side before bowing. There was naturally no need to worry about these treasures being lost in front of his master's cave abode. Come in. Luo Fan's faint voice came from the cave abode. Then, a few yellow-scarved warriors walked out of the cave abode and stored the heavenly materials and earthly treasures that Gu Ling, an old ancestor sky dragon, could not bring along into their storage space. Then, they led Gu Ling, an old ancestor sky dragon, into the search cave and arrived in front of Luo Fan. Gu Ling was not moved by the fact that the yellow-scarved warriors had casually put away the heavenly materials and earthly treasures that he had to carry on his back. He had absolute trust in Luo Fan and would never think that Luo Fan would renege on the heavenly materials and earthly treasures that he had painstakingly collected. Arriving in front of Luo Fan, the yellow-scarved warrior released all the heavenly materials and earthly treasures that he had collected. They floated in the air and casually rose and fell, looking very elegant. Luo Fan looked at these heavenly materials and revealed a faint smile on his face. When Gu Ling saw his master's expression, he knew that his master had completely seen what he had done. He could not help but blush. Disciple is ashamed, Gu Ling said with some shame. Forget it. Take out all the treasures you have collected. Luo Fan shook his head and smiled. Gu Ling could not help but be overjoyed when he heard that. He hurriedly signaled old ancestor sky dragon with the corner of his eyes and opened his storage space. Receiving Gu Ling's signal, old ancestor sky dragon also opened his storage space. In an instant, rare heavenly materials and earthly treasures were released from the two storage spaces one after another. Not long after, they piled up into a mountain that was tens of thousands of meters tall in the cave dwelling. The storage spaces of the man and dragon were rather large. They might not be tens of thousands of miles wide, but they were at least tens of thousands of meters wide. Such a huge storage space was filled with countless heavenly materials and earthly treasures. The amount was naturally imaginable. If it was not for the fact that the Seeker Cave was extremely mysterious and could even accommodate a mountain that was tens of thousands of miles wide, even Luo Fan might have been drowned by the countless heavenly materials and earthly treasures. Thank you, Master. After Gu Ling, an old ancestor sky dragon, released all the heavenly materials and looked at Luo Fan with great anticipation. You're smart. Luo Fan smiled. He was not moved by the countless heavenly materials and earthly treasures in front of him. Gu Ling chuckled embarrassedly, but he had no intention of taking the materials back. Luo Fan's eyes flickered. As the golden and silver light flickered in his eyes, the nature, effects, and uses of the countless heavenly materials and earthly treasures flowed into his mind through his eyes and was instantly grasped by him. Most of these materials are not very useful. Only these 3,236 will be of some use to your future cultivation. You can keep them. With a slight thought from Luo Fan, 3,236 kinds of materials separated from the towering mountain of materials and directly arrived in front of Gu Ling. Among the more than 3,000 materials, some looked very ordinary, like ordinary stones. Some looked very beautiful, like resplendent gems, and some like a cloud of mist, constantly changing. There were also some that were like liquid, flowing endlessly. There were all kinds of strange things, all different from each other. When Gu Ling heard Luo Fan's words, he didn't say much and directly stored the more than 3,000 materials into his storage space. Even without more than 3,000 materials, the towering pile of materials didn't look any different. It was still as tall as before. I'll refine a few defensive magic tools for you with the remaining materials. Luo Fan smiled when he saw Gu Ling put the materials away. With that, he casually pointed a finger and a gray mysterious flame appeared out of nowhere. It directly enveloped the pile of materials. This flame was the Dao fire that Luo Fan had obtained after attaining the Dao fruit. Now that Luo Fan had attained the Tai Dao fruit, the Dao fire had undergone great changes compared to when he was still in the earthly immortal Dao fruit. The flames of the way were purer, more mystical, and more powerful. It possessed countless powers that the Dao fire had never possessed before. After the pile of materials was enveloped by the Dao fire, it was instantly split apart. The countless materials were scattered into countless parts, and each part was burned and processed by the Dao fire. Countless changes appeared in the Dao fire. Each of the materials enveloped by the Dao fire was undergoing a completely different change from the other materials. Some materials completely melted, some solidified, some turned into gas, and some even changed their nature. There were all kinds of strange and different things, but they were all extremely mysterious. It was as if they were evolving the countless natural great Tao of heaven and earth. When Gu Ling and Patriarch Sky Dragon saw this change, they felt as if a mysterious door had opened in front of them. The changes of the countless materials in front of them in the Tao fire were like the supreme great Tao, showing them the highest mysteries of the transformation of matter. The mysteries revealed made them completely immersed. So this is how the evolution of matter looks like. This thought flashed through Gu Ling's mind. After this thought, he completely lost all other thoughts. Everything he saw, heard, and smelled was only the shape, sound, taste, and color of the countless materials in front of him in the Tao fire. Chapter 406. Chapter 446. Heavenly Dipper treasures. Both Gu Ling and Ancestor Tianlong had learned the way of refining artifacts. However, that was something that happened in the world they came from. Moreover, when they were refining weapons in their respective worlds, they would at most refine and purify the materials, then combine them together and engrave all sorts of formations on them. The power of the artifacts refined with such a method depended more on the formations engraved inside. If the formations could not do it, it would be difficult for the artifacts to do it. That kind of crude refining method could not be called a Tao at all. It was just a kind of technique. The artifact that was refined could hardly be called a real artifact. It was more like a combination of arrays and materials. It could only be called a mobile array. Gu Ling and Ancestor Tianlong had taken the initiative to collect many rare heavenly materials and earthly treasures in the primordial world for more than 1,000 years. However, it was just like how they refined and melted the materials through various methods, and then engraved some mysterious formations on them. When Luo Fan started to refine the weapon in front of them, and said those words that seemed ordinary, but sounded like the voice of the great Tao, Gu Ling and the old ancestor Tianlong came to a sudden realization. They instantly felt an indescribable sense of relief and fear. So this is the great Tao of artifact refinement. If I refine it like I did before, these materials would probably be completely wasted. The thought appeared in Gu Ling and Ancestor Tian Long's minds at the same time. However, this thought only lingered in the hearts of the man and the dragon for a split second. Immediately, the man and the dragon focused all of their attention on Luo Fan's refining process. They observed how the countless materials underwent all sorts of mysterious changes when they were enveloped by the Tao fire, and how the Tao fire changed the nature and state of these materials through some unbelievable method. Refining artifacts was also a great Tao, so it was naturally very simple for Luo Fan. After tens of thousands of years of cultivation and finally attaining the primordial unity Tao, Luo Fan's understanding of the Tao fruit of Tao had reached an unprecedented peak. The Tao fruit of Tao was recreated in a living being's body through some mysterious method, so it was naturally all-encompassing. All the magic, methods, and spells in the world could be included in the Tao fruit of Tao. Refining artifacts was naturally possible too. Sitting cross-legged on the brick bed, Luo Fan's expression was extremely calm and indifferent. His right hand moved casually in front of him, controlling the Tao fire that enveloped the materials that were as tall as mountains. He controlled the endless materials that were enveloped by the Tao fire to constantly change, purify, change some properties, suppress some properties, and increase other properties. His movements were very slow and calm, but every movement seemed to contain the endless truths of the world and the mysteries of the universe. Gu Ling and Ancestor Tian Long, and Dragon were both fascinated. They comprehended many truths that they could only vaguely sense in the past. Previously, when he used the true eyes of sun and moon to look at the countless heavenly resources, Luo Fan had already used his powerful vision to completely see through the past, future, and uses of the heavenly resources. Because of this, he was able to know that there were over 3,000 materials that were not suitable for him to refine into artifacts at the moment. They would need to be handled by Gu Ling himself in the future, so Gu Ling could put them away. At this moment, the designs of the 36 magic tools existed in his mind. Every single one of these 36 magic tools was extremely mysterious. Each of these countless materials were perfectly integrated into them, and they could bring out the advantages and characteristics of these countless materials. As a result, Luo Fan did not have the slightest doubt in his heart. He casually pointed and directly processed the countless heavenly resources in a specific way at the same time. Although he was only casually processing the materials, the cultivation realm was extremely profound after all. When the Tao fire processed the materials, it seemed to be evolving some kind of mysterious refining method, allowing Gu Ling and Great Ancestor Sky Dragon to gradually comprehend the true meaning of the great way of refining weapons. Although they were far from Luo Fan, who could perfectly process countless materials at will, they would no longer refine artifacts in such a crude way like they did in their respective worlds. It could be said that after witnessing Luo Fan's refinement, they had already taken the first step into the great path of refining. Luo Fan did not care at all how much Gu Ling and Ancestor Tian Long had comprehended. He just followed his own plan and moved unhurriedly. 2 hours passed. The towering mountain of materials had completely changed its appearance. Every single one of the countless materials had undergone a huge change. Some had melted into liquid, some had turned into a smaller solid, some had turned into a gas, some had turned into an invisible object, and some had grown thousands of times in size. There were all sorts of strange things. Almost all the transformations of matter could be found among the countless materials. The mysterious and complicated changes made the cave abode feel like it had entered an endless starry sky. The countless materials floated up and down as they were enveloped by the gray Tao flame. They slowly circulated according to some mysterious and unpredictable trajectory. The flickering light emitted by the Tao flame made the countless materials look like countless stars. Luo Fan did not stop when he saw this. With a wave of his hand, the countless star-like materials quickly condensed with the 36 cores and were divided into 36 piles of materials in the blink of an eye. Among the 36 piles of materials, the amount of materials in each pile had reached a shocking level. According to Gu Ling and the others refining methods in their respective worlds, these materials could at least be used to refine thousands of magic tools. Gu Ling and ancestor Tianlong had already entered a state of forgetting themselves. All they could see was the miraculous changes happening to the countless materials in front of them. After the materials were divided into 36 piles, they began to circulate according to various mysterious and unpredictable methods. The various materials began to conform to some mysterious rules and mix together. At this moment, Luo Fan had a thought. Countless complicated and abstruse three-dimensional talismans appeared in the void. The three-dimensional talismans were densely packed, and there were so many of them that it was as if they had constructed a whole new world. There were at least hundreds of thousands of three-dimensional talismans in every inch of the void inside the cave abode. These three-dimensional talismans were very mysterious. Each three-dimensional talisman seemed to be separated from the other three-dimensional talismans, but they also seemed to be unified. They seemed to be in a mess, but upon closer inspection, they seemed to form a complete world. It was as if each three-dimensional talisman was an indispensable part of this world. Gu Ling and ancestor Tianlong were stimulated by this sudden, huge change, and their bodies instantly trembled. There was a flash of understanding in his eyes. It was this change that allowed the human and dragon's understanding of the way of refining weapons to reach a greater level than before when they had observed for more than 2 hours. Luo Fan waved his hand casually. The endless three-dimensional talismans that seemed to form a complex world were divided into 36 piles. They quickly entangled and recombined, forming 36 organic bodies in the blink of an eye. After these 36 organic bodies were formed, they directly fused with the 36 piles of materials that Luo Fan had separated in the air, which had already been processed and mixed together. The moment the 36 organic bodies fused with the materials, the three-dimensional talismans in the organic bodies seemed to be attracted by a black hole and suddenly surged into the materials. As the three-dimensional talismans surged in, the materials also began to produce all kinds of mysterious and unpredictable changes. After the changes, the materials that were hundreds of meters tall, even when separated, began to shrink rapidly. It was as if the three-dimensional talismans surged in and suddenly opened up a huge space inside the materials. When the 36 organic bodies completely fused with the 36 piles of materials, the 36 piles of materials had already turned into 36 magic tools of different shapes. The largest was the length of an arm, and the smallest was the size of a thumb. The 36 magic tools floated in the Tao fire and were constantly burned by the Tao fire, but there were no changes at all. It was as if the Tao fire could no longer be used on them. Waves of ancient aura kept coming out of the 36 magic tools. Even though it was enveloped by the Tao fire, the aura could still be transmitted to Guling and Patriarch Sky Dragon, causing them to feel an indescribable shock. The huge amount of materials that were hundreds of thousands of meters tall had only been refined into magic tools that were not even as tall as a person. Their size had shrunk at least hundreds of millions of times. What kind of exquisite and mysterious refining method was this? Because Luo Fan's movements had stopped, Gu Ling and ancestor Tianlong gradually woke up from the state of no one and no me. After the man and dragon woke up, they stared blankly at the 36 magic tools that exuded an ancient aura. Their eyes were filled with infatuation. Although they had seen with their own eyes how these magic tools were transformed from materials into such small magic tools, this did not change their curiosity towards these 36 magic tools. It did not change their desire to understand the secrets of these 36 magic tools. Gu Ling and ancestor Tianlong could not guess Luo Fan's ability at will. Even if he showed the entire refining process to Gu Ling and ancestor Tianlong, they would only gain limited benefits. It was difficult for them to imagine the power of the 36 magic tools. Luo Fan had a thought. The Tao fire that enveloped the 36 magic tools suddenly shook and disappeared without a trace in the blink of an eye. However, he had already taken it back. After the 36 magic tools lost the Tao fire, they did not fall. Instead, they continued to float in the air. They even began to slowly circulate around an empty point in the void. This kind of circulation was not controlled by Luo Fan at all. Instead, it was caused by the mysterious structure of the 36 magic tools, which contained many mysteries. This is the Tiangang 36 Treasures, a set of magic tools. Although each magic tool in this set of magic tools only had one restriction, any number of magic tools in this set of magic tools could be combined into one magic tool. This magic tool contains all the restrictions of the magic tools that make up this magic tool, Luo Fan said with a smile. Following his words, the 36 magic tools suddenly combined in pairs. This combination process was extremely mysterious. It was not a simple stacking of the magic tools. Instead, it was as if the magic tools were disassembled into materials and then refined into another magic tool. After the combination was completed, it was completely impossible to see what the original 2 magic tools looked like. In the blink of an eye, 18 magic tools appeared in the void. These 18 magic tools were all magic tools with 2 restrictions. The power of each magic tool was much stronger than the previous one. Gu Ling, an old ancestor sky dragon's eyes lit up. They wanted to roar at the sky. Luo Fan's movements still didn't stop. These celestial artifacts once again separated and turned back into 36 celestial artifacts. Then, they suddenly gathered together in the void, and a mysterious change occurred. The 36 celestial artifacts disappeared and were replaced by a ship. It was a ship that was 30 feet long and 30 feet tall. It exuded an aura of perfected stage and had 36 restrictions inside it. After the ship appeared, the extremely rich chaotic chi that filled the cave abode suddenly became stagnant. Then, all of the chaotic chi underwent a mysterious but weak change. This change caused the chaotic chi that was closer to the ship to become softer and easier to control. It was as if it could be easily controlled by the ship and turned into the ship's power. When Guling saw this, she could no longer hold it in. Her body trembled, and she took a step forward. With one step, she landed on the deck of the ship. When he arrived on the deck, his body that was much taller than a normal person's had shrunk to the size of an ant. The 30 feet long and 30 feet tall ship was dozens of miles long and tens of miles tall compared to him. It was majestic and boundless. Guling was Luo Fan's disciple. Although it was inappropriate for him to be so rude, it was still acceptable. As a mount, old ancestor Sky Dragon could not be so rude. Therefore, Guling had already boarded the ship to personally experience the power of the magic tool. Old ancestor Sky Dragon could only watch enviously from below. Guling stood on the deck of the ship and felt that the deck was as wide as a plain. He felt that the cabin in front of him was like a towering mountain. He felt extremely safe, as if he could cross the void at will and control all kinds of power. He could not help but smile excitedly. After looking around the deck and entering the cabin to observe the various things inside, Guling was finally satisfied. He turned into a ray of light and shot out. He landed directly where he was and bowed to Luo Fan to ask for forgiveness. Luo Fan shook his head, but he did not care about Guling's rudeness. He just said, "You can't be so impatient in cultivation." Guling naturally lowered his head and listened. After Luo Fan finished speaking, he did not dwell on this matter anymore. He raised his hand and pointed. The ship suddenly collapsed and turned back into 36 magic tools that floated in the void. They continued to circulate according to a point in the void. The Heavenly Spirit 36 treasures are only at the initial stage. You could spend some time to refine them. The restrictions inside each magic tool can increase as you refine them. Their power can also increase as you refine them. Luo Fan said. With a thought, the 36 magic tools floated in front of Guling and landed gently. Guling looked and quickly put away the 36 magic tools one by one. He then bowed and said, "Thank you, Master, for the treasure. No need to be so polite. Although the power of the heavenly spirit 36 treasures is not bad, you must not put the cart before the horse. You must remember that your cultivation is the foundation. You must not let refining this set of magic tools affect your cultivation." Luo Fan said lightly. Guling heard Luo Fan's words and knew that Luo Fan was serious. He quickly said solemnly, "Disciple will remember. You can cultivate in the cave." Luo Fan nodded and said, "Yes." Guling quickly agreed. As he spoke, a yellow scarf warrior came up and guided Guling, an old ancestor Tian Long, down to a stone room in the Seeker Cave to cultivate. The 36 magic tools could be combined to form a new magic tool at any number. Moreover, the power of the combined magic tool would be greatly enhanced. Adding it all up, there were billions and billions of combinations. It could be said that Guling might not be able to completely familiarize himself with the Heavenly Spirit 36 treasures even after billions of years. If Guling put all his energy into this set of magic tools, he would definitely neglect his cultivation. It was precisely because of this that Luo Fan had directly reminded Guling not to neglect his own cultivation because of this set of magic tools. Guling and old ancestor Tian Long were led to the stone room by the yellow scarf warrior. After sitting down, he could not wait to take out the 36 magic tools and directly refine them. The internal structure of these magic tools was very mysterious. Although they only had the most basic layer of restrictions, it could be seen how earth-shattering these magic tools would be when they were finally refined. Guling had only refined 6 magic tools, but she had already discovered how mysterious this set of magic tools was. He was shocked. If I were to control this set of magic tools alone, I would not have the time to refine them to the 36 layers of restrictions. I would also not be able to refine this set of magic tools into magic treasures. Such a thought flashed through Guling's mind. After this thought flashed through his mind, Guling finally realized how strange this matter was and stopped refining the magic tool. He could not figure out what his master meant. He could not help but raise his head and look at old ancestor Tian Long with a headache. At this moment, old ancestor Tian Long looked at him enviously and looked at the magic tools in his hands. Chapter 407. Treasure, Splitting Sky Dragon, Permitha Bridge. I need to distribute these magic treasures and give them to different cultivators to control. Then, I need to gather everyone's power to refine these magic treasures and finally form a rather large force. Such a thought flashed through Guling's mind. He didn't hesitate and said to old ancestor Tian Long, "These 36 heavenly spirit treasures are profound and not something I can fully control by myself. I'll give you 6 of them. You can choose which 6 you want." With that, he waved his hand. Apart from the 6 magic artifacts that he had refined, the remaining 30 magic artifacts floated up and floated in front of old ancestor Tian Long. Old ancestor Tian Long revealed a pleasantly surprised expression when he heard Guling's words. However, he immediately fell into deep thought. Every single one of these arcane artifacts is profound and unfathomable. They contain endless mysteries within them. I'm afraid that 2 or 3 of them will be my limit. I'm afraid that I won't be able to fully control 6 of them. Old ancestor Tian Long shook his head. It's fine. You don't need to refine all 6 of them. According to Master's plan, I'm afraid he wants me to find more creatures to control these 36 magic treasures and gather everyone's power to turn them into magic treasures, allowing their power to reach its limit. It doesn't matter if you can only control 3 magic artifacts perfectly. Even if you can't control them yourself, you can find some living beings to refine them for you in the future. Guling smiled. Hearing this, old ancestor Tian Long was slightly surprised. After pondering for a while, his expression changed to one of understanding. He had already understood what Guling meant. He couldn't help but say in admiration, "I see. Great Immortal's plan is truly exquisite and mysterious. It's hard to grasp the sequence of events." With that, he didn't stop and casually picked 6 of the 30 magic artifacts. The 6 magic tools instantly left the pile and arrived in front of old ancestor Sky Dragon. The 36 magic artifacts were all different in size. There were sabers, spears, swords, halberds, axes, hooks, tridents, plates, mirrors, banners, poles, and rulers. They all had their own mysteries and mysteries. The 6 magic tools that Sky Dragon Old Ancestor had chosen looked very ordinary, but he was very satisfied with them. With a thought, he sent his imprint of will directly into the 6 magic tools, penetrating deep into the layer of restriction inside the magic tools. Seeing that old ancestor Tian Long had refined the 6 arcane tools together, Gu Ling smiled and put away the remaining 24 arcane tools. Then, he imprinted his imprint into the depths of the arcane tools restrictions. Apart from the 6 magic tools chosen by old ancestor Tian Long, the other 30 magic tools were refined together. Although Gu Ling had already decided to hand over these magic tools to the living beings he would find in the future to control and refine them, it did not mean that he would give up his absolute control over these magic tools. Since they wanted to form a force, they naturally needed a leader. The leader between Gu Ling and old ancestor Tian Long was very obvious. Of course, it was Gu Ling who was the master and old ancestor Tian Long who was the mount. This leadership was decided by Luo Fan more than 1,000 years ago. It was rooted in the restriction that Luo Fan had placed in the depths of old ancestor Tian Long's spiritual consciousness. As long as old ancestor Tian Long was not stronger than Luo Fan, he could not change this fact. Therefore, between the man and the dragon, there was not much need to guard against each other. Gu Ling naturally did not need to hide his imprint of will in the magic tools that he handed over to old ancestor Tian Long. However, it was different for the other living beings that he would gather in the future. No matter how much he trusted the living beings that he gathered in the future, they would definitely not be comparable to old ancestor Tian Long. It was also impossible for the master-slave restriction in the depths of old ancestor Tian Long's spiritual consciousness to exist. If he did not hide his imprint of will in these magic tools, it was very likely that those living beings would become the master. It was precisely because of this that Gu Ling hid the imprint of will in these magic tools. After the initial sacrificial refining of the 30 magic tools, Gu Ling put away 24 of them and put them into his double dantian, forming a mysterious and complicated system, like a mysterious array, which occupied most of the space in the dantian. Gu Ling only took a quick glance at this formation and did not pay it any mind. These celestial artifacts were forged by her master and could be assembled at will. It could be said that any number of celestial artifacts could form a complete set of celestial artifacts. These 24 celestial artifacts were no exception. It was only natural that they could faintly connect with each other and form a mysterious system. However, he did not need to spend too much time being surprised. After putting away the extra magic tools, he used his mind, and the remaining 6 magic tools floated in front of him. Among these 6 magic tools, one was a large blank seal, one was a triangular flag, one was a round bronze mirror, one was a jade pillow, one was a square piece of silk, and the last one was a meter-long wooden ruler engraved with many strange markings. These 6 magic tools floated in the air and began to adjust their positions according to some very special rules. Gradually, they combined into a complete and mysterious whole, emitting a mysterious and strange power. Gu Ling looked at these 6 magic tools, his expression unchanged. He spread out his mind, and the embryonic form of magic power in his body slightly vibrated. It was released from his body according to the sacrificial refining method recorded in the magic tools, wrapping the 6 magic tools in it. It constantly condensed and transformed into complex and mysterious 3-dimensional talismans that merged into the 6 magic tools. Gu Ling cultivated this soul spirit proving Tao formula, which was a very mysterious cultivation method that contained endless mysteries. The Tao that he cultivated was also the Tao fruit that Luo Fan had personally taught him. The profoundness of this Tao fruit great Tao was something that even the powerful existences that came from the nine-league great world, who could establish a Tao field in the primal chaos, had to praise. Naturally, it was not something that the Dragon Emperor Tao, that old ancestor sky dragon cultivated, could compare with. Therefore, although Gu Ling was still one step away from attaining the earthly immortal Tao fruit, his cultivation realm was much lower than ancestor sky dragons. However, with his current ability, he could easily control 6 magic tools at the same time. He was not like ancestor sky dragon, who could only control 3 magic tools and had already reached his limit. Because of this, Gu Ling could so easily refine these 6 magic tools at the same time. The Big Dipper 36 treasures refined by Luo Fan were incomparably mysterious, and their power was even more formidable. However, no matter what kind of magical tool it was, the first few restrictions were the simplest and the easiest to refine. The Big Dipper 36 treasures were naturally no exception. Therefore, Gu Ling only took 3 days and 3 nights to refine the second restriction on these 6 magic tools at the same time. With the completion of the second restriction, the 3-dimensional talismans that he had formed with the embryonic form of magic power for the past 3 days suddenly trembled in the air and emitted dazzling rays of light at the same time. The rays of light surged out from each of the magical tools and suddenly turned into a net, wrapping around the 6 magical tools from all directions. These 3-dimensional talismans rotated rapidly, constantly recombining, and gradually turned into 6 layers of incomparably complicated restrictive spells, emitting endless brilliance, filling this stone room that seemed to be only a few dozen feet in circumference, but could easily accommodate a small mountain, making this stone room even more mysterious. These 6 restrictions were the second restriction of the 6 magic tools, and they were relatively independent. However, there was an extremely subtle connection between these 6 restrictions. This subtle connection caused the light between the 6 restrictions to constantly circulate and exchange, as if there was some obscure information intertwining and circulating between the 6 restrictions at a speed that surpassed everything else. This process was very short, almost in a 10,000th of an instant. The 6 restrictions instantly paused and suddenly shrunk, directly retracting into the 6 magic tools. In the blink of an eye, it had disappeared, allowing the 6 magic tools to completely return to their original, simple, and ordinary appearance. The moment the 6 restrictions drilled into the 6 magic tools, a wave of information suddenly came out of the 6 magic tools and directly surged into Gu Ling's mind. This was the power, effect, and nature of the 6 magic tools. So this is a real magic tool. Gu Ling could not help but sigh after looking through the information transmitted from the 6 magic tools. These 6 magic tools were indeed the magic tools that Luo Fan had refined using the tool refining Tao. Their power was secondary. What shocked Gu Ling the most was that these 6 artifacts seemed to be incomparably complete, as if they were natural creations made by the heavens and earth. There was even some kind of faintly discernible life force within them. Although he could completely control these 6 artifacts, he could not find any way to modify them or add or remove the materials used to make them. This feeling was as if he was facing a natural creature, a naturally occurring creature. Compared to these 6 magic tools, the magic tools that he had refined in the myriad bones reborn heaven were like building blocks. He had simply combined those materials together. There was a world of difference between the two. Even he could not measure the difference between the two. After lamenting for a while, Gu Ling looked at old ancestor Sky Dragon, who was refining the 3 magic tools. Even though Sky Dragon Ancestor's cultivation realm was higher than Gu Ling's, and the number of magic weapons he refined was much lesser than Gu Ling, but at this moment, Sky Dragon Ancestor did not refine the second restriction on the 3 magic weapons. He was still continuously condensing one 3-dimensional talisman after another into the 3 magic tools. Old Ancestor Sky Dragon's power was the power of the Dragon Emperor. Its nature was naturally of a higher level than the power that he had cultivated in the past. However, there was still a big gap compared to the requirements of the internal restrictions of these magic tools. Therefore, after these restrictions were formed, they still needed to be tempered by the restrictions again. Only after their nature was improved could they be integrated into the magic tool. It was also because of this that old ancestor Sky Dragon had to spend more time refining the magic tools. However, this was not without any benefits for old ancestor Sky Dragon. On the contrary, the benefits for old ancestor Sky Dragon were relatively great. This was because after forming the restriction, his power of the Dragon Emperor still needed to be refined again by the magic tools. However, old ancestor Sky Dragon gradually saw the direction of the power of the Dragon Emperor during the process of refining the magic tools. The process of refining the magic tools for 3 days and 3 nights was also a process of refining his power of the Dragon Emperor. After these past few days of tempering, at this moment, his Dragon Emperor's power was much purer and more condensed than before. Although it still hadn't undergone a true transformation, it had improved tremendously. Guling looked at old ancestor Sky Dragon's surprised and depressed look, and a smile appeared on his face. With a thought, the 6 magic tools that were floating in front of him, which had already been refined by him with the second restriction, slightly trembled. Then, according to some mysterious and unpredictable method, they drew 6 mysterious trajectories and gathered at a certain point in the center of nothingness. In the blink of an eye, the 6 magic tools interweaved together. Hundreds of millions of rays of light appeared out of nowhere, completely covering the true appearance of the 6 magic tools. At this moment, there was suddenly a huge amount of information that almost covered Guling's entire mind. Even his spiritual consciousness could not bear it and felt like it was about to collapse. Suddenly, a huge amount of information surged out from the 6 magic tools and flowed into his mind through some mysterious connection. In an instant, it made him feel sluggish, and his thinking became sluggish. After sorting out the information with great difficulty, Guling's face was full of shock. At the same time, he was very glad that he had given some of the magic tools to old ancestor Sky Dragon. This information was the information that could be formed from the combination of the 6 magic tools. It included the structure of all 360 magic tools, the formation of restrictions, the sacrificial refining method, the power, the characteristics, the flaws, and so on. The 6 magic tools could be divided into 360 combinations in any number and any kind of combination. There were so many combinations, and each of them formed a magic tool that was completely different from any other magic tool. It was as if they were 2 magic tools that were completely unrelated to each other, and they bore no resemblance to any of the magic tools that had originally formed this magic tool. In other words, any one of the 360 combinations was equivalent to a brand new magic tool. Any combination would have a completely different profundity. If he wanted to master this new combination, it would be like refining a brand new magic tool. And these magic tools were all refined by Luo Fan. Guling already knew the mystery of them. The power of these 360 types of magic tools, as well as the amount of information needed to master them, could be imagined. This is already the case with the 6 magic tools. If I refine the 36 magic tools at the same time, Guling thought to himself, cold sweat almost immediately dripping down his forehead. He could imagine that even if he could control all 36 magical tools at the same time, if he were to refine all 36 magical tools at the same time, and combine them together to form the ship-shaped magical tool that Luo Fan had once performed, the information transmitted from the magical tool would definitely damage his soul sense. It was even possible that his entire sea of consciousness would explode from this confidence. At this moment, Guling's admiration for Luo Fan, who had easily combined the 36 magical artifacts into that mysterious ship 3 days ago, could not be any greater. Sure enough, master is master. The information that could make my spiritual sense explode is actually so easy for him to handle. Guling's face showed fear. Luckily, these were only 6 magic tools. Even though the amount of information was huge, it was still within the limits of what he could handle. Thus, Guling's thoughts moved and the light disappeared. The 6 magic tools disappeared and were replaced by an arched bridge. This arched bridge seemed to be carved from a single piece of stone. It was 3 feet long and 3 feet tall. The entire arched bridge looked very simple and ordinary. There were no talismans or runes on the surface of the bridge. However, on the side of the bridge, there were many densely packed reliefs. These reliefs were carvings of all living things in the world. Almost every living being that Gu Ling could think of and had seen appeared on them. Moreover, these reliefs were very lifelike. One could even see the thoughts of these living beings from the eyes of these reliefs. One could see their desires and thoughts. The bridge of the Primordial realm carries all living beings and connects the earth, water, fire, and wind to the Primordial realm. I didn't expect that the combination of 6 celestial instruments would be such a powerful celestial instrument. The ship that Master formed 3 days ago must be even more mysterious. Gu Lingji responded to the power of this celestial instrument, and her mind was filled with shock. The name of this magic tool was the Bridge of the Primordial. Inside it, there were 6 layers of restrictions. It could carry all living beings, control the earth, water, fire, and wind, and connect 2 spaces. Gu Ling could even faintly feel that if he refined more restrictions on this bridge of the Primordial, it could directly connect 10,000 bones reborn to this primitive world. This was what shocked Gu Ling the most. Gu Ling was extremely confident in his feelings. In order to connect the 10,000 bones reborn heaven and the chaotic world, one would need to refine this Dharma artifact to at least 216 layers of restrictions. In other words, the 6 Dharma artifacts that formed the Primordial bridge had to be refined to perfection with 36 layers of restrictions. However, this was already an earth-shattering power. It should be known that in the past, he had used up almost all the power of the entire 10,000 bones reborn to create an unstable space-time portal with the help of the space-time rift. It could only bear the passage of weak living beings. Now, he realized that as long as the number of restrictions on this magic tool was enough, it could cross space-time at will and connect 2 completely different worlds. Moreover, this was not all of the bridge of the Primordial's power. It was just a small part of its infinite power. How could Gu Ling not be shocked by this? So that's how it is. If I refine these 6 magic tools to the level of Dharma treasures, their power will be even more shocking. They can even connect to any world. When that time comes, I might be able to travel between billions of worlds. How carefree would that be? Gu Ling's body trembled slightly when he thought of this. Chapter 408. Stabilizing the cauldron path. Gu Ling suppressed this obviously foolish thought. With a thought, he sent a mental imprint deep into the deepest layer of restrictions on the other shore bridge. The Otherworld Bridge was originally formed by the fusion of 6 instruments, and the deepest seal of the 6 instruments had Gu Ling's mental imprint within it. He had refined it a long time ago. However, that only meant that the Nirvana Bridge belonged to Gu Ling. If he wanted to control the Otherworld Bridge perfectly, use it without any hindrance, and unleash its greatest power, he needed to reinscribe his mental imprint. He also needed to refine every single seal of the Otherworld Bridge. After all, the fusion of the 6 instruments into an even more powerful instrument was not a simple combination. Instead, it was a recombination using some mysterious and profound method. Even though each of the restrictions came from the 6 magic tools that formed this magic tool, they had already undergone an incomparably mysterious change. It was impossible for him to use the experience he had gained from using the 6 magic tool restrictions to use this fusion restriction. Hence, he needed to refine it once again. As he engraved his mental imprint into the deepest seal of the Otherworld Bridge, the mental imprint that was originally in the depths of each of the 6 instruments suddenly shook. Following an extremely mysterious method, it swam within the Otherworld Bridge. In the end, it completely connected with the imprint that he had engraved in the deepest part of the Otherworld Bridge, forming an extremely mysterious and profound imprint. This imprint was even more mysterious than the imprint inside the 6 celestial artifacts. Its control over the celestial artifacts was also much stronger. With a slight thought, the otherworld bridge shook. In the blink of an eye, it expanded 100 times. From its original length of 30 feet, it became more than 3,000 feet. Its height also became more than 1,000 feet. This humongous otherworld bridge stretched across the void. One end was connected to the front of Guling, while the other end pierced into the void. It seemed to be connected to an unknown distance. Although this stone room was not small, it was only an ordinary place for cultivation. It was impossible for it to be 3,000 feet wide. However, such a huge permethop bridge that spanned across the void was not conspicuous in the stone room. It did not seem crowded at all, and it was easily accommodated by the stone room. It was extremely mysterious. Guling stood up and took a step forward, directly stepping onto the Nirvana bridge. As soon as he stepped onto the bridge, Guling felt that his integration with the void had increased by more than 100 times. He took a light step forward. He had only crossed 3 feet on the bridge, and it seemed like he had only crossed 3 feet. However, it felt like he had crossed 1,000 miles. A mysterious power was constantly emitted from the Permetha bridge, cleansing the ancient spirit's body and resisting the powerful pressure produced by the changes in the surrounding void. In the blink of an eye, Guling had already arrived at the end of the other shore bridge. The Permetha bridge slowly faded away and disappeared from the stone chamber. When it reappeared, it was at the foot of Bujo Mountain. The place where Guling had comprehended was also before the space-time illusion. Guling stood on the other side of the Permetha bridge, appearing here as well. With the help of the imprint that he had carved inside the Permetha bridge, Guling carefully sensed all the changes that had happened earlier. A look of comprehension appeared in his eyes. So this is what the void looks like. After a long while, he let out a long sigh. With a thought, the Permetha bridge rose from the ground and connected to the void again. He walked across the Permetha bridge effortlessly and disappeared into the void along with it. When he reappeared, he was in the stone room of the search cave with the Permetha bridge. After getting off the Permetha bridge, Guling waved his hand, and the Permetha bridge collapsed with a loud bang. It turned back into 6 ritual implements. As for the 6 magic tools, the will imprints that had originally fused into one had once again split apart. Even the imprint of Guling's will that was originally engraved in the depths of the restrictions of the bridge of other Permetha had been hidden in the void through some mysterious method. It seemed to be in every single artifact, yet it seemed to have transcended any other artifact. It was mysterious and indescribably wonderful. Guling stared at the 9 ritual implements before him. He used his strong willpower to put the 6 ritual implements into his double dantian. He closed his eyes and circulated the embryonic form of the magic power in his body to refine his body and polish his mind. After a while, old Ancestor Sky Dragon let out a clear whistle. The 3 magic tools that he had refined for a long time trembled slightly, and countless 3-dimensional talismans rushed out of the 3 magic tools, forming 3 layers of extremely profound restrictions in the air. They emitted countless specks of light, then abruptly retracted and returned to the 3 magic tools. Through these days of refinement, he had also refined the 2nd layer of restrictions on the 3 ritual implements. The instant he refined the 2nd restriction on these 3 magic treasures, countless pieces of information were transmitted into his mind through some kind of unfathomable connection, and he easily sensed them. When old Ancestor Sky Dragon received these messages, a look of shock appeared on his face. With a thought, the 3 ritual implements instantly gathered and condensed into a 3-inch-tall ritual implement that looked like a high-necked vase. As soon as this ritual implement appeared, the endless chaotic chi in the surroundings quickly gathered and condensed into extremely rich water essence. When it rippled slightly, there was even the sound of water. Old Ancestor Sky Dragon raised his hand and waved. The high-necked vase ritual implement flew into his hand. The tentacles were incomparably heavy, as if they were dragging a huge mountain. With a slight thought, a stream of water rushed out from the high-necked vase, condensing into a blue transparent humanoid avatar in the air. It floated in the air, making Old Ancestor Sky Dragon seem to have an additional body. Wonderful! Old Ancestor Sky Dragon exclaimed. The human figure took a step forward and landed on the ground. As if it had a real body of flesh and blood, it made various movements with great agility. Then, another stream of water rushed out of the ritual implement and condensed into another human figure. It came to the side of the previous human figure and also made movements with great agility. It's a pity that my cultivation is not enough. I can only control 2 clones. Old Ancestor Sky Dragon could only sigh helplessly when he realized that he could no longer condense any more clones. The 2 clones did not emit any aura at this time. They looked like sculptures that were condensed from pure water essence. However, Old Ancestor Sky Dragon knew clearly that as long as he imprinted his thought into the ritual implement in his hand and refined it, the 2 clones would become his real clones. They would be able to take on his appearance and possess the same strength as him. At this time, the ritual implement only had 3 layers of restrictions. Compared to the perfect state of 108 layers of restrictions, when the 3 ritual implements fused together, there was a world of difference. If he could refine this ritual implement to the perfect state of 108 layers of restrictions, he would at least have 1,296 clones with the same cultivation and strength as him. Even if he had the cultivation of the Golden Immortal Realm at that time, and even if he had the same cultivation as Luo Fan, it would still be the same. After Old Ancestor Sky Dragon sighed, he raised his hand and shook it. A powerful suction appeared out of thin air and acted on the 2 clones that were like flesh and blood. The 2 clones turned back into 2 streams of water essence and rushed back into the high-necked vase. The vase returned to normal. Ancestor Tian Long had already figured out the characteristics of this celestial device. With a thought imprint condensed in the deepest restriction of this celestial device, producing a mysterious power. The will imprints of the other 3 celestial devices that originally existed in this celestial device shook slightly and gathered in this newly appeared will imprint, forming a mysterious and complete will imprint. Thank you, Master. Old Ancestor Sky Dragon felt the mysterious connection between him and the ritual implement after the imprint was formed. He sighed and bowed to Gu Ling. There's no need to be so polite. Although Master ordered you to be my mount, haven't you seen through it after more than 1,000 years? When have I ever treated you as a mount? It's just a few ritual implements. Why do you care? Gu Ling sighed. A look of gratitude appeared on Old Ancestor Sky Dragon's face, but it soon disappeared. After bowing to Gu Ling, he put the magic tool back into his dantian and split it up, turning it back into 3 magic tools. They combined into one with the 3 magic tools that were already in his dantian and began to slowly circulate according to some mysterious method, displaying some mysterious laws of the world and the mysteries of the universe. Old Ancestor Sky Dragon was an arrogant person. Normally, it would be more painful for him to call Gu Ling Master than to kill him. However, at this time, he had to call Gu Ling Master, because if these 6 artifacts were placed in his hands and he refined them first, the benefits for him would be too great, too great. The symbolic meaning of the 6 ritual implements was extraordinary. It meant that he could occupy an extremely important position in the force that Gu Ling established in the future. With the help of the 6 ritual implements, he could obtain an unimaginable status. However, this was only secondary. The most important thing was that the power of the 6 ritual implements was not only reflected in their offensive or defensive abilities, but also in the promotion of his cultivation. With the 6 ritual implements, Old Ancestor Sky Dragon would no longer need to cultivate any cultivation methods or his way of the Dragon Emperor. As long as he continued to refine the 6 ritual implements, his cultivation would rise to an unimaginable level when he finally refined them into ritual implements. Although it would take an unimaginably long time, if he continued to cultivate his way of the Dragon Emperor at the same time, his cultivation speed would be more than 100 times faster. Moreover, after being cleansed by the power of the ritual implements, When he reached the same realm in the future, the power he would possess would be more than 10 times stronger than when he did not cultivate with the help of the ritual implements. This kind of benefit was almost unbearable for old Ancestor Sky Dragon. If he did not express his submission, even old Ancestor Sky Dragon would feel apologetic. After putting away the ritual implements, old Ancestor Sky Dragon did not say anything else. He sat down cross-legged and began to adjust his breath to cultivate. He tried to master the power of the Dragon Emperor that was enhanced by refining the 3 ritual implements. There are some things that did not need to be said, but needed to be done. After Gu Ling and old Ancestor Sky Dragon left to refine the ritual implements, Luo Fan entered the Void Wuji Palace again and sat down cross-legged on the platform in the strange palace. Then, with a wave of his left hand, Pan Gu's ear bone, which had been lying in the universe in the sleeve for several days, appeared in his hand. The Pan Gu's ear bone was still the same as before. It looked ordinary on the surface, but with a closer look, one would find that it contained endless mysteries. The untainted world was created by Pan Gu. Even the name Pan Gu contains many mysteries, not to mention this Pan Gu's ear bone. If I can understand the mysteries in it, I might be able to cultivate a magical power like Pan Gu's ear. Luo Fan thought to himself. With a thought, golden and silver light flashed in his eyes. He had already activated the true pupils of the sun and moon to the limit, trying his best to lock on the Pan Gu's ear bone. The surface of Pan Gu's ear bone was thickly covered in a dazzling light, shielding everything from the outside world, including spirit power, senses, and sight. However, the true pupils of the sun and moon were a pair of pupils cultivated from the Pan Gu chaotic heavenly pupils, which happened to be the nemesis of the Pan Gu's ear bone. When the true pupils of the sun and moon were activated, the endless rays of light were directly separated. The structure of the endless rays of light was directly unfolded in Luo Fan's mind and reorganized. In the blink of an eye, it turned into endless lines, outlining a complex and profound, but incomplete pattern. After Luo Fan separated the barrier of the light, he continued to go deeper. In an instant, he felt an indescribably vast, profound, and powerful force emerging from the Pan Gu's ear bone. This kind of power was incomparably obscure and incomparably stable. It was even more stable than any kind of stable material that Luo Fan had found in the Great Desolate World, and any kind of tough boulder was more difficult to break. Such a stable force was surely extremely hard to detect. If Luo Fan hadn't been using the true eyes of sun and moon, which he had cultivated to the second level of the Pangu chaotic heavenly pupils, which naturally corresponded to this Pangu ear bone, it would have been absolutely impossible for him to use this power. It's just a trace of power, but it's actually hundreds of millions of times stronger than all of my magic power. Luo Fan's complexion couldn't help but change when he saw this power. This Pangu's ear bone was 10 meters in radius, but the power contained in it was only the size of a spider's web. Nevertheless, this slight trace of power already made Luo Fan feel like he was looking up at a great mountain. There were many units of magic power in his body, and when they were gathered together, they were billions of times more powerful than a single strand of power. Each unit of magic power contained endless mysteries and unbelievable power. With his current cultivation realm of Tai Dao fruit, any unit of Dharma power in his body was enough to easily destroy a cultivator of the golden immortal realm. However, such a powerful Dharma power, such a large amount of Dharma power, could not compare to this spider's silk-like power. Sensing the power of this force, Luo Fan was overjoyed after the shock. This bone was Pan Gu's ear bone. Even if this power was not the power left behind by Pan Gu, it was definitely related to Pan Gu. The nature of this power must contain the essence of the power of a cultivator at Pan Gu's level. If he could comprehend the mystery of this power, it would be infinitely beneficial to his future cultivation path. First, I got the body with a human body and a snake tail, And then I got this power that seems to be the power of Pangu. It seems that the luck of heaven and earth is with me. Luo Fan thought. Thinking of this, he did not hesitate to turn his eyes and carefully observe the microscopic structure of this Pangu's ear bone. Pangu created the untainted world. His body, his consciousness, and all his understanding of cultivation set the mystery of the great Tao of the untainted world, the nature of heaven and earth, and the truth of the universe. The structure of Pangu's eardrum naturally corresponded to some mysterious law of the untainted world. Luo Fan's eyes went deep into this Pangu's ear bone. The mystery of the internal structure of this Pangu's ear bone turned into endless information, crazily rushing into his mind through his eyes, filling every area of his mind, and making him feel that his sea of consciousness was slightly swollen. The structure of Pangu's ear bone was unimaginably complicated. One flower, one world, one grain of sand, one world, and that was it. In this bone, almost every cell contained endless lines. These lines intertwined with each other in an incomparably complicated way, forming a messy shape. It seemed extremely chaotic, but contained some sort of law within it. In addition to the internal structure of the cells, the composition of these cells was also extremely complicated. Almost any two cells were connected by some faintly discernible lines. The number of these lines was secondary. What was more troublesome was that the composition of these lines was also extremely complicated, and it also contained some kind of deep mystery. When the situation inside and outside the cells were combined, the complexity and mystery had increased by hundreds of levels. If he wanted to understand the composition of these lines, the composition of these cells, and the role of these cells, the amount of information needed to be sorted out was imaginable. If this information was input into the mind of a cultivator in the golden immortal realm at once, it would definitely make the cultivator's mind and spirit into powder in an instant. His divine soul would collapse, and his sea of consciousness would shatter. Even though Luo Fan had attained the Tai Dao fruit at this time, and had taken a big step forward in the Tai Dao fruit level, in the face of such a large amount of information, he only felt his mind tremble and tense, and his sea of consciousness felt uncomfortable. With a thought, the Tai Dao fruit in Luo Fan's body suddenly exploded, turning into a stream of Dharma power. It rushed out of his body through the acupoints all over his body, dispersing and reforming in front of him. Soon, it formed a formation in the shape of the Tai Dao fruit. Chapter 409. The Tai Heavenly Escape Formation had a radius of 1,000 feet. Every single detail was exactly the same as Luo Fan's Tai Dao fruit. Every single formation point's circulation and change corresponded to his Tai Dao fruit, and similarly contained an unimaginably profound profundity. After the formation was formed, it shook slightly. As the void rippled, an indescribably mysterious wave was emitted from it. In a trance, Luo Fan seemed to see the supreme great Tao lifting a few barriers in front of him. Unfortunately, the supreme great Tao revealed by the lifting of the barriers was something that Luo Fan had already known for a long time. He had even completely comprehended it. After all, the Tai Dao fruit was condensed by Luo Fan after he had comprehended all kinds of mysteries of the great Tao. It itself represented Luo Fan's cultivation realm. It represented the boundless mysteries that he had comprehended after coming to the primordial world in his entire life. It would be strange if the mysteries of the great Tao were beyond what Luo Fan knew. Luo Fan was not moved at all. With a thought, he raised his hand and pointed at the Tai Heavenly Escape Formation. In the blink of an eye, a ray of spiritual light rushed out of his hand and directly rushed into the center of the mysterious formation like a clear stream. This light contained countless words, images, and talismans. It contained an infinite amount of information. All of these were the mysteries that Luo Fan had comprehended from the Pangu's ear bone. They were about the structure of the Pangu's ear bone and the combination of the lines in it. Luo Fan's sun and moon true pupils locked on Pangu's ear bone, ceaselessly extracting the essence of the bone and transforming it into all kinds of information. The information flowed through Luo Fan's spirit power, then turned into light spots, merging with the light spots and surging into the Tai sky escaping formation through his fingers. During the whole process, Luo Fan was like a transition. He transformed the mysteries of Pangu's body into information, and then sent it directly into the great formation in front of him. However, he didn't directly comprehend the mysteries of Pangu's earbone. After the information flow entered the Tai heavenly escape formation, the formation began to emit a mysterious and indescribable light. This light seemed incomparably bright, yet also seemed incomparably obscure. It didn't make people feel that it was glaring at all, but at the same time, it made it impossible for anyone to ignore its existence. This light shone bit by bit according to some extremely complicated pattern. Not long after, this mysterious formation seemed to be drawn out bit by bit with some kind of mysterious brushstrokes. One could even see traces of Luo Fan's own magic arts. The speed at which the light lit up was extremely fast. Not long after, all the formation points were completely lit up. The light had also reached its most mysterious peak. It looked like a mysterious ball of light with a radius of hundreds of meters was constantly surging in front of Luo Fan. However, even so, this formation had only reached the critical stage of starting to operate. It could only exert some kind of mysterious power to imbue the spirit light into this formation, turning the spirit light, which was originally invisible and intangible, into something similar to a substance, and began to condense in this formation. During this process, in the center of the formation, the outline of Pangu's ear bone gradually took shape. This Pangu's ear bone wasn't a real thing. Instead, it was composed of countless characters, patterns, runes, talismans, patterns, and so on. Almost all the carriers that could record information and the mysteries of the Great Tao could be formed. At the beginning, the outline of Pangu's ear bone was only a rough outline, but as Luo Fan gained more and more information from the real Pangu's ear bone, it became more and more perfect. This whole process lasted for 3 whole months. When he finished cultivating the true pupils of sun and moon, they had already become Luo Fan's eyes. They were no different from his natural eyes. For Luo Fan, using the true pupils of sun and moon did not consume any energy at all. However, this did not mean that Luo Fan did not consume any energy to use the true pupils of sun and moon for such a long time. This was because during the process of using the true pupils of sun and moon, Luo Fan needed to focus his mind and activate his thoughts. He worked hard to organize all the information received by the true pupils of sun and moon, categorizing them and condensing them into spots of spirit light that were sent out of his body and into the Tai heavenly escape formation. For him, this was naturally not a problem for a short period of time. However, for Luo Fan, he did not have a single moment of free time for 3 months in a row. This was not easy for him either. After these 3 months, Luo Fan's face couldn't help but show a trace of fatigue. Through these 3 months of continuous condensation, the Panga's ear bone that was completely condensed from all kinds of information carriers in the formation was already very complete. It did not seem much different from the real Panga's ear bone. Clearly, it had reached the final stage of transferring all the information of the Pangu's ear bone to the formation. On this day, Luo Fan's eyes narrowed. The light of the true pupils of sun and moon grew slightly brighter, and the spirit light that flowed out of his hand abruptly increased by 10 times. The spirit light surged into the Pangu's ear bone in the center of the formation and rushed into its depths. At the very center, it condensed into the last talisman. As this talisman took shape, the spirit light that continuously surged into the talisman frantically rushed into it, quickly filling it up. When all the spirit light had surged in, the talisman was already as complete as the other information carriers. At this moment, Luo Fan finally let out a long breath and retracted the true pupils of sun and moon. He spread his fingers and clapped them forward. With a thought, The endless brilliance of the Tai heavenly escape formation began to move in extremely mysterious trajectories in a mysterious way. As the brilliance flowed, countless lines were emitted from the formation and directly rushed into the Pangu's ear bone in the center of the formation. They reached the deepest part and began to analyze the mysteries of the Pangu's ear bone from the inside out. After the entire formation began to operate, the feeling of the supreme Great Tao being demonstrated in front of him became even stronger. The brilliance that was already mysterious and contained countless mysteries became even more mysterious and profound. I'm afraid it will take several years to fully analyze it. Luo Fan sensed the operation of the Tai heavenly escape formation and made a judgment in his mind. Although it was a little tiring for Luo Fan to continuously transfer the mysteries of the Pangu's ear bone in the past 3 months, he had already attained the Tai Dao fruit, and his cultivation was earth-shattering. He only needed to stop for a breath's time before he completely recovered and returned to his peak state. Knowing that the Tai heavenly escape array would take several years to produce the final result, Luo Fan raised his hand and gently waved. The Tai heavenly escape array in front of him slightly shook and then flew up. After a while, it arrived 3 feet above Luo Fan's head and stopped. It was like an auspicious cloud that emitted a mysterious brilliance as it rotated above his head. After that, he raised his hand and waved. The Pangu's ear bone, which he had been analyzing for 3 months, came to him within his reach. He pressed his right hand on the Pangu's ear bone. The Pangu's ear bone was a rare treasure. Amongst them, there were 2 most important and precious points. Firstly, it was the structure that contained the profundities of the primordial Great Tao. Secondly, it was the strands of spider silk that were hidden within it, and it was a power that was millions of times weaker than the magic power within his body. At this time, Luo Fan had already transferred the mysteries of the Pangu's ear bone to the Tai heavenly escape formation to analyze. What he needed to do now was to understand that power. The Tai heavenly escape formation was a mysterious formation constructed by Luo Fan with all the power units inside his body, according to his own Tao fruit. The analysis power of this formation was extremely mysterious. It could analyze almost any principle of heaven and earth and the mysteries of the universe, but it needed a different amount of time. Because of the uniqueness of the formation itself, when the formation analyzed all kinds of mysteries, Luo Fan could understand everything as well as if he himself had understood everything, although it would take him more time to do so. Although Luo Fan didn't understand the structure of the Panga's ear bone before, he had spent 3 months observing it with the true pupils of sun and moon, so he was very familiar with its structure. With a thought, his right palm slightly shook in a mysterious and unpredictable way, as if he was activating some kind of exquisite martial art. In an instant, his right hand went through the strong resistance of the dazzling light on the surface of the ear bone and directly touched the body of the ear bone. Touching it, he felt that it was infinitely cold, but also very warm. It was a very mysterious feeling. With a slight movement of his mind, Luo Fan instantly found the hidden location of that force. As Ji Hao shook his palm, an incomparably strong power was generated, directly acting on that power through the structure of the Panga's ear bone. Compared to Luo Fan, the power, which was as small as a spider's thread, was almost negligible. At this moment, the magical suction released from Luo Fan's palm could easily pull any planet out of its orbit. However, when this powerful and terrifying suction force acted on the spider's silk-like force, it felt as if it was acting on the entire universe, the entire world. That power seemed to be indescribably heavy. No matter how much this suction grew, and no matter how skillfully it acted on this power, it couldn't change the orbit of this power. Not even a little bit. Like a never-ending planet, this spider's thread of power flowed unhurriedly in the Pangu's ear bone according to a mysterious orbit. The astonishingly powerful and mysterious suction force emitted from Luo Fan's palm was like a planet that suddenly had a bit of cosmic dust added to it. There was not the slightest bit of change. I knew it. Seeing this, Luo Fan wasn't surprised at all. Instead, He seemed to have expected it. Although this power was extremely small, to the point that it could be blown away by a gentle breeze, it was, after all, a power of Pangu, or a power that was closely related to Pangu. If this power was described by Luo Fan's Great Way of Tao, then it could only be obtained after attaining the fruit of Tao of origin. The nature of this power was at least equal to the power that Luo Fan could only obtain after attaining the fruit of Tao of origin. At this time, Luo Fan had only just attained the Tai Dao fruit. Compared to the fruit of origin, he still needed to attain the perfection of the Tai Dao fruit, and then attain the Daoyuo Dao fruit, and then attain the perfection of the Daoyuo Dao fruit. Only then would he have a slight chance to attain the fruit of origin. The gap was so huge that it could be imagined from the difference in strength between Luo Fan and Luo Chunyang, who had just attained the earthly immortal Dao fruit. With such a huge gap in strength, at this moment, Luo Fan's entire body, including the power, the Tai Dao fruit, the strength of his physical body, and all the divine abilities and techniques, might be countless times weaker than this spider's thread of power. Under such circumstances, it would be a fantasy for Luo Fan to be able to shake this force. Luo Fan's Dao heart was firm, and he had an extremely clear understanding of his own cultivation realm and strength. At this moment, he had naturally expected such a situation, so how could he be moved by it? Feeling that he was unable to deal with this power, Luo Fan was not discouraged. With a thought, he casually grabbed the Pangu's ear bone and stuffed it into the mud pill palace between his eyebrows. Then, through a mysterious place in the depths of the mud pill palace, he rushed into the world of his sea of consciousness and directly arrived in front of the Pangu's skeleton in the center of the sea of consciousness. This Pangu's skeleton was formed by Luo Fan's divine soul, but it was also Luo Fan. He opened his mouth and swallowed the Pangu's eardrum into the universe in his body, and it stood side by side with the inextinguishable spiritual light. Then, with a thought, countless strands of his will drilled into the universe inside the Pangu's ear bone, directly wrapping it up and seeping into it, trying to reach the power hidden deep in the ear bone. The Pangu's ear bone was born from the body of Pangu, who created the world. If it was in the outside world, with Luo Fan's cultivation realm of the Tai Dao fruit, it would be extremely difficult for him to seep into the ear bone, just like an ordinary person trying to dig through a 300-meter-tall mountain. However, in the depths of the sea of consciousness, in a universe inside the divine soul, because of the nature of the universe and the layers of barriers in the void, the difficulty of seeping into the ear bone was reduced by hundreds of times. Puff! Although there was a strong resistance, within the span of a breath, Luo Fan's will had penetrated the barrier of the light on the surface of the eardrum and directly drilled into the body of the Pangu's ear bone. This ear bone was magical, containing endless mysteries, but in essence, it was just an ear bone. Even though its structure was astonishingly complicated, its size was not very large. After only a few hours, Luo Fan's will had already penetrated countless obstacles and arrived at the depths of Pangu's ear bone, around the strands of spider, silk-like power. The origin of this power was way too amazing. Even someone like Luo Fan, who had a strong heart of Tao, couldn't help but be shocked, feeling that he couldn't calm down anymore. Maintaining the state of relying only on that force, but not letting it come into contact with that force for a while, Luo Fan slightly calmed his emotions. Just now, with a thought, that vast force suddenly exploded and drowned that force in an overwhelming manner. Then, it frantically poured into that force, wanting to see through the mysteries of that force that even the sun and moon true eyes could not see through. At this moment, Luo Fan's body shook intensely. Without any sign, countless wounds appeared on his incomparably strong body. These wounds were densely packed and wrapped around Luo Fan's entire body, almost covering every inch of his body, making him look like a bloody man. Instantly, the bright red blood gathered into a puddle on the platform beneath him, growing wider and wider. Luo Fan's physical body was extremely strong, and even ordinary magic treasures couldn't hurt him. The power contained in his blood had reached an unimaginable level. Every drop of blood that flowed out of his body contained a power that was strong enough to shatter a 100,000 meters tall mountain. After meeting Yuan Tong's family of three, Luo Fan had comprehended the method of rebirth from a single drop of blood from their patterns. After attaining Primordial Unity Dao, this ability of rebirth from a single drop of blood had already reached the point where he could be reborn with just a speck of dust. Based on these abilities, the wounds that had appeared on Luo Fan's body should have been a small problem for him. He should have been able to heal them easily with just a thought. Even if he couldn't, the blood that flowed out of his body should have changed form. Even if it did not turn into another Luo Fan, it should still be filled with boundless vitality and would not be lost like the blood of ordinary living beings. However, this was not the case at all. The wounds were just like the wounds on an ordinary person's body. They only kept increasing in size and density, but they showed no signs of healing at all. Every drop of blood that contained enough power to shatter a 100,000 meters tall mountain gave off a mysterious aura as it flowed out of his body. As this aura spread, the blood lost all its power and vitality. The fresh aroma of the blood was replaced by a pungent smell of blood, and it smelled awful. The change of Luo Fan's body was already so intense, and the change of the spiritual world was even more earth-shattering. At the moment, this peaceful and lively spiritual world was now filled with thunderbolts and rumbling thunders. The space was shaking, seeming to collapse at any moment. The world, which was supported by Jihao's spirit, began rolling. The pressure seemed to have increased by thousands of times, making Pan Gu's bone creak, seeming to turn into a pile of bone powder at any moment. Chapter 410. Just now, the moment Luo Fan sent his will into the power that seemed to be Pangu's power, an immeasurably strong force burst out of it. This mysterious force acted directly on Luo Fan's will. It completely crushed his will in an instant, turning his originally condensed and pure will, which could almost shatter the void, into the tiniest powder. Moreover, after turning all the thoughts that had probed into it into powder, the mysterious power did not stop. Instead, it began to follow the connection between the thoughts and directly extended into the inner part of the power. In an instant, it affected Luo Fan's entire mind, his entire soul, his entire sea of consciousness, and even his entire body. The wounds on his body were caused by this mysterious force. The blood that gushed out of his body had undergone such a change due to the effects of this mysterious force. Ordinary living beings would have panicked long ago when such a situation occurred. However, Luo Fan did not care at all. His mind was extremely calm, and there were not even too many distracting thoughts in his mind. Although his consciousness had only entered the interior of the force for a moment before it was crushed by the mysterious force, Luo Fan had also seen the interior of the force in that instant. Even if my body is destroyed because of this, it's worth it. The moment he saw the scene inside the power, such a thought flashed through his mind. The power was only the size of a spider's thread and seemed so weak that almost anyone could ignore it. However, there was another world inside. The moment Luo Fan's will entered, he felt as if he had arrived in chaos. He could even faintly sense that it contained billions of worlds. The vast and boundless energy and the boundless chaos caused Luo Fan to feel that all the grand Tao profundities he'd comprehended since arriving in the primordial world were so shallow, so simple. With just a glance, he felt that his cultivation realm had increased significantly. Even the Tai Heavenly Escape Formation, which was made up of all his mana, had changed slightly due to the increase in his cultivation realm. It seemed to have become more rounded, and its speed of operation seemed to have become faster. Its analytical ability had also increased by a lot. It was silent and undetectable. Luo Fan's entire body collapsed with a loud bang. His spiritual sea world was left shaking slightly in the void, seeming to disappear at any moment. At this moment, when the sea of consciousness was about to collapse and his soul was about to be submerged, Luo Fan's thoughts moved. The innate, indestructible spiritual light in the world within his soul slightly trembled. In an instant, it expanded and shrunk, wrapping the Pangu's ear bone within it. The inextinguishable divine light was incomparably mysterious, containing endless secrets. The moment it wrapped the Pangu's ear bone up, the mysterious power released from the bone was instantly isolated. The will that had entered the Pangu's ear bone was completely crushed and turned into nothingness. But except for the inextinguishable divine light, it was no longer affected by the mysterious power. Along with this change, Luo Fan's spiritual soul, which had already turned into Pangu's skeleton, returned to normal. His spiritual sea, which had been shaking ceaselessly and seemed to be on the verge of collapsing and disappearing at any moment, also returned to normal. In the void, the surging gray matter that resembled chaos gradually regained its original surging strength during this process. The pressure of this world also gradually returned to its normal state. His indomitable spirit no longer felt that it was unbearable. After the mysterious power faded, the shattering of his body was no longer a problem for Luo Fan. Even though his physical body's ability to be reborn from a single drop of blood had been erased by that mysterious power, it was still the same. Especially at this moment, in the strange palace inside the everlasting Void Palace, as Luo Fan's thoughts flickered, endless chaotic energies gathered in the void. Under the nourishment of the chaotic Yuan Qi, the endless powder produced by the collapse of his body gradually underwent a mysterious change. Such a change seemed to be reversing the flow of time. Gradually, some mysterious power was added to the powder, allowing the powder, which had lost all its power, to regain all its original power. As the powder changed, flesh and blood began to grow bit by bit from the powder. Then, countless fleshy tissues floated up and gathered around the sea of consciousness whirled in the void. The gathering speed was extremely fast. Almost in the blink of an eye, a tall and indescribably tall Luo Fan was formed in the void. This Luo Fan was exactly the same as the previous Luo Fan. There was no difference at all. His entire body floated 3 feet above the ground. His expression was incomparably calm and indifferent. Even his robe was the same as before. With a thought, Luo Fan opened his eyes. The gold and silver light in his eyes were warm and smooth, as if he could see through everything. It seems like I've reached the bottleneck of the peak of scatter. Luo Fan sensed his cultivation realm and suddenly had this realization. The Tai fruit of Wei was similar to the earthly, immortal fruit of Wei. It was also divided into 3 realms. However, it wasn't divided by the scattered immortal, true immortal, and golden immortal realms. Instead, it was divided by scatter, truth, and gold realms. After all, immortal was the earthly immortal fruit of Wei, not the Tai fruit of Wei. Therefore, the Tai fruit of Wei could only be divided into numbers. Among them, scatter was the initial achievement. It could barely be called. Truth was the meaning of perfection and truthfulness. Gold was the strongest and most precious. It meant perfection. Number referred to the number of heaven and earth. It was the recognition of heaven and earth. It could control heaven and earth. At this moment, Luo Fan's realm was the peak of the Tai scatter. As long as he broke through the incomparably sturdy barrier that he felt at this moment and broke through the bottleneck that restricted his progress, he could easily achieve the Tai true number and make the Tai fruit of Wei complete. At that time, Luo Fan's cultivation, strength, and cultivation realm would reach an unimaginable level. He would be at least 100 times stronger than he was now. It took me hundreds of thousands of years to reach the peak of the Tai scatter. If I want to cultivate the Tai fruit of Wei to the realm of perfection, I'm afraid I'll need more than tens of thousands of Yuan Wei. As Luo Fan was delighted, he felt that the road ahead was long. After he achieved the Tai fruit of Wei, only a few thousand years had passed in the primordial world. But to him, hundreds of thousands of years had passed. In these hundreds of thousands of years of cultivation, although the improvement was great, it only allowed him to reach the peak of the Tai scatter from the initial stage. And this was also because he had a rare opportunity to obtain the incarnation of a living creature in the Julie Great World that could open up a Taoist field in the chaos. And this wisp of suspected Panga's power. From this, it could be inferred how difficult it was to cultivate the Tai fruit of Wei. Luo Fan understood the realm of his cultivation realm. He knew that it was not possible for him to break through in a short time, even if he had the suspected Panga's power. However, this did not stop him from continuing to comprehend the suspected Panga's power. Although he had reached the peak, it did not mean that he could not improve. In this peak, Luo Fan could not rely on this kind of understanding to directly break through the bottleneck and achieve the Tai true number. But he could rely on this understanding to improve the quality of his magic power, increase the number of magic power units, and also improve his cultivation realm. This was very important to Luo Fan, but he could not give it up. With a slight thought, Luo Fan's spirit directly drilled into the spiritual world of his body. After his body reformed, the spiritual world had already returned to normal. It looked exactly the same as before Pangu's ear bone entered. Thinking of this, he did not stop. He directly drilled into the world inside Pangu's skeleton and saw Pangu's ear bone, which was wrapped in the innate, inextinguishable spirit light. At this moment, Pangu's ear bone was lying quietly inside the innate, inextinguishable spirit light. It looked like an extremely ordinary bone. Luo Fan had obtained this innate, inextinguishable spirit light from the valley where Proud Lai and Proud Een originally resided. It took him tens of millions of years to subdue it, and he had to use a bit of his own divine sense to undergo reincarnation. It was so mysterious that it was hard to describe. The suspected Pangu's power was incomparably strong and had infinite power, but did not transcend the prehistoric world. Therefore, this innate, inextinguishable spirit light, which was born before the world and could not be damaged after the birth, also worked on this power. Because of this special feature of the pre-world inextinguishable spirit light, Luo Fan was able to shield himself from the mysterious great power, which was supposed to be Pangu power, so easily, so that his body and soul wouldn't be erased by the great power. Although his soul had already refined a strand of innate, indestructible spiritual light that came from the outer realm and possessed the property of being indestructible, if his body and soul were to be wiped away by this mysterious force, then he would need to waste a very long time before he could condense his soul and body again and recover his supreme might. That would be a great loss as well. This innate, inextinguishable spirit light could isolate the mysterious power from affecting the body and the spirit. But this time, Luo Fan did not move it away. Instead, he directly sent his spirit into the innate, inextinguishable spirit light. Wrapped by the innate, inextinguishable spirit light, Jihao slightly vibrated and rushed into Pangu's ear bone, then came to the mysterious power deep in the ear bone. This power was exactly the same as what Luo Fan had seen before. It did not change at all because of the mysterious power that killed Luo Fan's spirit, nor did it because of the mysterious power that destroyed Luo Fan's body. Luo Fan's spirit was the spirit of Tai Lu's number. Naturally, it could not withstand the impact of this power, which seemed to only belong to the fruit of Tao of origin. If this spirit went in, it would definitely be killed in an instant. Without the protection of the innate, inextinguishable spirit light, this power might even affect his spirit and physical body and directly erase his existence. Luo Fan was very clear about this. However, this did not change Luo Fan's decision. With the protection of the innate, inextinguishable spirit light, he did not need to worry that the mysterious power would affect his physical body and his spirit. With his Tai Lu's number spirit, no matter how much he lost, he could quickly recover. Even if all of his thoughts were killed and erased by this force, he would be able to make his thoughts full again in a breath's time, as if they were at their peak. Therefore, the loss of his spirit was nothing to Luo Fan. It's totally worth it to exchange all of my spirit for that moment of enlightenment. Luo Fan's spirit was firm and unwavering. Instantly, his spirit directly bumped into that power without hesitation. Because he was already mentally prepared, His senses were raised to the limit during this process. At that moment, he felt as if time had been stretched countless times longer. All kinds of changes generated by that spirit, and all kinds of feelings were extremely clear. An indescribable feeling, like pain and joy, came from his spirit, which had been injected into that power. Not only did the inside of that power look like chaos, but it might also seem like chaos. A mysterious power was born from it, and continuously killed the spirit that he had injected into it, turning the spirit into the tiniest speck of dust. However, it was not absorbed by the power, but directly turned into nothingness as the power rippled. Even though Luo Fan's perception of that moment was stretched countless times longer, and if it was somewhere else, he would feel as if that moment had been tens of millions of years. However, within this power, it was still just a moment. His perception of time still did not change at all. Everything he saw and sensed was exactly the same as the last time he was here. Chaos, it was still chaos. The void, it was still the void. The endless world hidden in the depths of chaos was still so deep that it could not be seen. After the mysterious power killed all of his spirit, it began to spread out along his spirit. Just like before, he wanted to directly erase his soul, physical body, and sea of consciousness through his will. At this very moment, the pre-world undying light that wrapped Pangu's ear bones slightly rippled and cut off this mysterious power that was about to spread out, saving Luo Fan's spirit and body. Ji Hao only lost a big half of his spirit, and within the span of a breath, he had recovered completely. After his spirit recovered, Luo Fan directly sat down with his legs crossed and closed his eyes. Countless lights flashed across his mind. The scene inside that power was recreated in his mind. Unfortunately, the mysteries hidden in this power were too profound and mysterious, just like true chaos. No matter how hard Luo Fan tried, no matter how much he tried to simulate and reconstruct it in his mind, the scene he constructed only seemed to be the same as the inside of that power. In essence, it was like the difference between the clouds and mud, just like the difference between a mobile phone model and a real mobile phone. After a long time, Luo Fan let out a long breath and opened his eyes. This time, his harvest was much less than the first time. He did not even feel the slightest improvement in his cultivation realm. However, Luo Fan was not discouraged at all. His face was still calm and tranquil. This situation was not far from what he had expected. The inside of this power was almost like chaos, and it even contained countless worlds. It was many times more mysterious than Buzhou Mountain. Naturally, when he saw such a mysterious thing for the first time, his mind was greatly touched, so he had a huge harvest. After the second time, the harvest naturally became less and less. Unless his cultivation realm increased to the point where he could completely comprehend this mysterious thing, he could not change this trend and completely comprehend this mysterious thing. It was like facing Buzhou Mountain. Back then, when he first came to the primordial world and raised his head to see Buzhou Mountain for the first time, Luo Fan's mind was greatly touched. He instantly used Pangu's primordial spirit to comprehend the Dao fruit's great Dao from Buzhou Mountain. After that, he lived on Buzhou Mountain for more than a period of time. However, he only obtained many rare heavenly and earthly treasures. He did not improve at all in his understanding of the mysteries of Buzhou Mountain. Even Buzhou Mountain was like that. This power, which seemed to be countless times more mysterious than Buzhou Mountain, was even more so. Although I'm not touched and the changes are not great, that's only because what I see is the same as before. If I can see more, I will definitely be touched again. Such a thought flashed through Luo Fan's mind. After such a thought flashed through his mind, the Sutra of the Dao Fruits, great Dao scripture, slowly flowed through his mind. Soon, an incantation became extremely obvious, suppressing the entire Sutra of the Dao Fruits, great Dao scripture. This was the heavenly penetrating earth mantra, a mantra to refine one's mind. By using this mantra, one's mind could become tougher, purer, and more condensed. The reason why Luo Fan's spirit power was destroyed so easily by that mysterious power was that his spirit power was Tai, which meant that his spirit power was limited. Therefore, he couldn't withstand the pressure released by that mysterious power, which seemed to be Pangu power. Under such circumstances, if he wanted his will to last longer in that power, he naturally needed his will to become even more resilient and able to endure it. This heavenly penetrating earth mantra was suitable for this situation. After choosing the mantra, Luo Fan did not hesitate at all. With a thought, the heavenly penetrating earth mantra was directly unfolded in his mind. The mantra flowed directly into his mind. At the same time, a strand of his mind was separated, and along with the circulation of the mantra, a mysterious change was generated. This will quickly condensed from its original flat surface appearance. It gradually condensed into the shape of strands of lines. It wasn't difficult for Luo Fan to condense his mind into lines, but it would cause his mind to be unstable, and it would be a problem for him to maintain it for a long time, not to mention improving his mind's bearability. Chapter 411. Chapter 451. Pangu Chaotic Ear under the magical effect of the through sky and earth penetrating magic art. The lines condensed from Jihao's will begin twisting and connecting with each other according to some complicated rules, gradually forming tiny, dust-sized, three-dimensional spell symbols. These three-dimensional talismans were very ordinary in shape. They were like the tips of needles, small and sharp. Countless three-dimensional spell symbols gathered in one place and merged the will of Jihao into one, which was not much different from when Jihao activated the through sky and earth penetrating magic art. However, the size of these spell symbols had shrunk by over 10,000 times. Every single one of these tiny, three-dimensional spell symbols contained immeasurable mysteries. Their structure was incomparably stable, and the power that made up these three-dimensional spell symbols had to be at least 10,000 times stronger than before. After condensing this strand of will with the through sky and earth penetrating magic art, Luo Fan didn't stop. He directly stopped the magic and sent this strand of will into Pangu's spiritual space, into the world inside Pangu's skeleton, then suddenly drilled into Pangu's ear bone, which was inside the pre-world indestructible spiritual light. Within a blink of an eye, Jihao had already approached the power that seemed to be Pangu's power. This power was exactly the same as before and didn't show any change after being invaded by Luo Fan's will twice. Instead, it was still flowing unhurriedly along a mysterious track. Luo Fan's will slightly moved. The will of his will, which was over 10,000 times stronger than before, suddenly surged into this power. A mysterious force was born out of thin air and directly acted on Luo Fan's condensed thoughts. An indescribable, magical feeling emerged from this power, instantly sweeping across Luo Fan's entire mind and soul. It was as if the entire world was rejecting him, despising him, and oppressing him. Under that magical power, the three-dimensional spell symbols that formed his will collapsed one after another, shattering one after another. At last, they turned into nothingness. The process of collapsing and shattering was like a leaf decaying in the long years, or like a stream flowing from high to low, or like the sun and the moon rising and setting in the west. No power could resist it, and no living creature could stop it. This process of collapsing and shattering and turning into nothingness was tens of thousands of times slower than the previous two times. Because of this, Luo Fan could barely sense the process of collapsing and shattering and turning into nothingness, which allowed him to faintly sense the mysterious power working in a mysterious way. At this moment, Luo Fan instantly forgot his plan of observing the internal situation of this power and focused all his mind on how this mysterious power worked. Regardless of whether this power was Panga's power or not, it was definitely countless times stronger than the Tai Disperser. Under such circumstances, the Tai Disperser was countless times stronger. Any trace of mystery revealed by this power was extremely rare for Luo Fan at this time. It was an existence of great significance for him to learn. Naturally, the mysterious power that this power gave off was the same. The reason why Ji Hao wanted to sense this Pangu power was because he wanted to learn some secrets that he couldn't understand at the moment. This mysterious great strength was generated naturally by this Pangu power and couldn't be compared to the true secrets of this Pangu power. But to Ji Hao, it made no difference. Luo Fan carefully sensed that his mind was slowly collapsing, shattering, and turning into nothingness under the mysterious force. Gradually, he sensed an indescribable rhythm. This rhythm was extremely mysterious, and it contained the great Tao of heaven and earth within it, causing Luo Fan to feel the true essence of some kind of martial arts. So that's how it is. Feng Zi sensed this rhythm. Luo Fan's thoughts, which he had poured into this power, had already been completely destroyed by the mysterious force emitted by this power and turned into nothingness. As for Luo Fan, he could no longer sense the inside of this power. Slowly opening his eyes, Luo Fan's eyes were filled with faint joy. This rhythm was not a simple rhythm. The supreme great Tao contained in it was almost more profound and unpredictable than all the mysteries of the great Tao that Luo Fan had comprehended during the process of attaining the primordial unity fruit of Tao. In this situation, Luo Fan felt that his control over his power and the world seemed to have deepened a little. His words were the law, and his ability to command the world had also improved a lot. With a thought, he once again activated the through heaven and earth method. Another will, which had just recovered, was separated by him and began to change according to this method. Not long later, that mind instructs, in a second, once again transformed into its previous tough and unbreakable state. With a turn, Luo Fan poured it directly into the world of his sea of consciousness, rushed into the inside of the universe of his divine soul, directly passed through the innate, inextinguishable spiritual light, and entered Pangu's earbone. This time, he didn't hesitate. He directly rushed into the power that was suspected to be Pangu power. After another while, the will was annihilated by the mysterious power. Once again, Luo Fan was enlightened. Just like that, Luo Fan continuously condensed his will according to the through heaven and earth method, transformed it, and sent it into the power, which was then annihilated by the mysterious power. After being tempered by the penetrating heaven and earth technique, that strand of will was able to last 100 times longer than normal. However, that was still an extremely short period of time. Almost every breath, there would be a cycle of tempered will piercing into the power, and then being annihilated by the power. However, even so, Luo Fan was able to comprehend something with every breath. He was able to comprehend some of the mysteries of the world and the principles of the great Tao that he did not know before. Time passed slowly. Just like that, the process of comprehending the power for a moment with every breath lasted for 100 years. One day after 100 years, Luo Fan's body shook, and he suddenly opened his eyes. The golden and silver light flashed in his eyes, becoming brighter and gentler, as if he could see through everything. Any living creature, intelligent or not, as long as they saw this light, they would know that Luo Fan's true eyes of sun and moon had made great progress compared to 100 years ago. I didn't think that 100 years had passed. Luo Fan sighed deeply. During this 100 years, every breath was a cycle of comprehending the power. According to this calculation, there were hundreds of millions of cycles in the past 100 years. With such a large number, even if he could only see the inside of the power for a moment in each cycle, it was already a long time. Because of this period of constant observation and comprehension, Luo Fan's harvest was also quite huge. Not only had his true eyes of sun and moon improved because he had comprehended the circulation method of that power, he was one step closer to the third level of the Pangu chaotic heavenly pupils. Even his cultivation realm had improved a little compared to before. This kind of improvement made Luo Fan feel that his magic power seemed to have a tendency to increase again. However, because his magic power was currently being used to construct the Tai Heavenly Escape formation, he couldn't really confirm whether his feeling was correct or not. With a slight thought, his mind shook slightly, and countless light shadows appeared in his mind, gradually constructing a boundless chaos. This chaos was many times simpler and cruder than the chaos he had constructed 100 years ago. However, it looked completely different from the chaos that only had a shape 100 years ago. At that time, it had been constructed forcibly according to his memory. No matter how complicated and detailed it looked, it didn't feel real at all. However, this chaos, although simple and cruder, and even with only a little shape, was extremely real. With one look, one would know that it was taken from chaos. It made one feel that if this simple chaos continued to be perfected in the future, it would definitely become a chaos that contained endless heaven and earth. This was the transformation of the endless mysteries that Luo Fan had comprehended from the trace of power of Pangu in the past 100 years. Although this chaos contained more of the power of Great Tao that Luo Fan had comprehended since he came to this primordial world, there was not a trace of the mysteries of heaven and earth that truly surpassed his current cultivation level. However, that was already a start. He had already truly integrated all of his various understandings into the source of chaos. In the future, as long as his cultivation level could improve, he would definitely be able to make this chaos scene in his mind more perfect. This didn't seem to be too beneficial at this time. However, Luo Fan was extremely clear that as long as his cultivation level reached the level of seeking the fruit of Tao of Daoyuo, or even the fruit of Tao of primordial chaos, he would definitely be able to reduce the difficulty of breaking through the bottleneck by 1,000 times. That benefit was so great that Luo Fan almost couldn't control himself. Once again, he looked at the extremely rough and crude chaotic scene in his mind. It was almost like an abstract pattern outlined by a few strokes. Luo Fan calmed down and slowly dispersed these patterns. He looked at the Tai Heavenly Escape formation that had been operating for 100 years in front of him. At this moment, this formation had already been running to the extreme. The endless brilliance emitted from it had already reached a dazzling level. The flowing brilliance revealed all kinds of supreme truths of heaven and earth and the mysteries of the Great Tao, which were so complicated that almost any living being could comprehend some kind of cultivation method that would lead them straight to the Tao and immortality with a single glance. It's been 100 years. No matter how complicated this Pangu's ear bone is, it's time to analyze it. This thought flashed across Luo Fan's mind, and his mind connected to the formation in front of him. The moment his mind connected to the formation, endless information directly poured into his mind through his mind in an extremely gentle way. The information was endless, all about the mysteries of Pangu's ear bone. It was the countless results derived by the Tai Heavenly Escape formation over the past 100 years. With a slight thought from Luo Fan, the endless information was quickly reorganized, constantly scattered, and absorbed into his own memory. This process lasted for 3 days and 3 nights. After 3 days and 3 nights, the information suddenly reached its peak. It was like the last radiance of a setting sun, almost bursting Luo Fan's mind. Fortunately, he was prepared. Although the information was violent and huge, it was a little difficult for him to accept, but it was not really impossible. After spending a little energy, he finally managed to accept this huge amount of information. At this moment, the great formation in front of him also rumbled endlessly. These sounds seemed to be the sound of the great Tao, but it also seemed like the entire world was celebrating. It was grand, majestic, and filled with boundless joy. Amidst the mysterious noises, the Tai Heavenly Escape formation gradually stopped. The endless light emitted by the formation also faded during this process, slowly revealing the true form of the formation, which looked like a Tai fruit of Tao, and the results derived by the formation over the past 100 years. It was a thick book. This book was as wide as a door, and it was 3 feet thick. It was a magnificent sight to behold. With a slight thought from Luo Fan, the Tai Heavenly Escape formation suddenly collapsed, turning back into a stream of magic power. It suddenly rushed into Luo Fan's acupoints and circulated 81 times in his body according to the requirements of the nameless magic power. Then, with a sudden vibration, the number of talismans increased by half, from the original 25. 92 million talismans to 38. 88 million. Instantly, he felt that his cultivation level had improved a little. The cultivation level that was originally at the peak of the Tai loose number was improved again, getting closer to the Tai true number. It seemed that with a slight change of thought, he could achieve the Tai true number. Sure enough, there is a great improvement. Feeling the change of his magic power, Luo Fan could not help but show a faint smile on his face. With a change of thought, the magic power that had increased by half suddenly shrank, and in his dantian, a faintly discernible Tai fruit of Tao, which seemed to contain all things in the world, was condensed. As it trembled and shrank, it seemed to become more real. Luo Fan was slightly startled. He felt that his words were the law, and his ability to command the world seemed to have increased a lot. From the original 20,000 miles radius, it had increased to 49,000 miles radius. It had increased by more than 2 times. This improvement was beyond Luo Fan's expectation, and he was quite surprised. With a faint smile on his face, Luo Fan opened his eyes, raised his hand, and waved. The book, which was as wide as a door and as long as a door and 3 feet thick, was deduced by the Tai heavenly escape formation from the information of Pangu's ear bone, slowly drifted forward. Soon, it came into Luo Fan's hand and shrunk into the size of a dictionary. The 6 characters of Pangu Chaotic Heavenly Ear appeared on the cover of the book. These 6 characters were written in the Pang script. The complicated and mysterious lines made Luo Fan feel that they seemed to contain some profound truths of cultivation. Sure enough, Luo Fan's mind moved, and such a thought flashed through his mind. Then the endless information he had obtained from the Tai heavenly escape formation instantly emerged, quickly integrated, and formed into a towering, incomparably huge book, like a huge mountain of books. The 6 characters of Pangu Chaotic Heavenly Ear also appeared on its cover. This book was deduced by the Tai heavenly escape formation, and naturally, it was organized from the endless information he had obtained from the formation. At this moment, he knew that this information could be organized into a cultivation method, so naturally, the cultivation method was easily integrated by him. With a slight thought, Luo Fan raised his hand and clapped. The book directly turned into a ray of spiritual light, directly flew up, and was thrown into the space between his eyebrows. It easily drilled into it, entered his mud-pill palace, and directly rushed into the world of his sea of consciousness through a mysterious place in the mud-pill palace. It exploded with a loud bang, turning into endless words, images, spells, and talismans. In the end, they were completely devoured by the spirit, turned into memories, and appeared in his mind. They merged with the Pangu Chaotic Heavenly Ear in his mind, allowing Luo Fan to instantly understand the cultivation method of this book. Even the most subtle and profound parts were not left out. With this ear, one can hear all the sounds of heaven and earth, the ghosts of the human heart, the past and the future, and even the supreme Great Tao and the heavenly sounds of the Great Tao. This thought flashed across Luo Fan's mind. In an instant, Luo Fan had decided to immediately cultivate this mysterious technique. With a slight thought, the cultivation method of the Pangu Chaotic Heavenly Ear was directly unfolded in his mind. The route of cultivation and the mantra naturally began to operate. This mysterious technique was also divided into 4 realms, like the Pangu Chaotic Heavenly Eye. Among them, the first realm was the Yin-Yang Divine Ear, which could hear the ghosts of the human heart and the sounds of heaven and earth. After cultivating this ear, one could directly hear the thoughts of all living creatures and could also hear all the sounds of heaven and earth that cultivators wanted to hear. For example, if Luo Fan could hear this realm, then in this untainted land, anyone who mentioned Luo Fan's name or even thought of Luo Fan's words and thoughts would be directly heard by him. In addition, almost all other sounds, such as the collision of primordial chi, the sound of plants growing, the sound of thunder, and so on, could be heard by him. Just like the Pangu chaotic heavenly, this realm could only be cultivated by a cultivator who had attained the earthly, immortal Tao fruit. The second realm of the Pangu chaotic heavenly ear was the space-time real ear. It could hear the past, the future, the boundless world, and the boundless space-time. If one cultivated this ear, not only could he possess the various powers of the first realm of the yin-yang divine ear, but he could also hear the sounds of the past and the future. He could even transcend space-time and hear all kinds of sounds in the billions of worlds outside the untainted land. This realm was similar to the true sun and moon eyes. Only cultivators who had attained the primordial unity Tao fruit could cultivate it.